Chapter 10:15. This Emperor shall fulfill your wish. The heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity's mind exploded. Suddenly, he recalled the old man who desperately tried to stop him before he'd sent troops to the heavenly court. He had saved the old man by chance when he was traveling the 10,000 races in his early years. Because he saw that the old man was proficient in divination, he left him in the mansion. It was said that over the endless years, this old man had obtained countless secret treasures through deduction. He didn't expect that saving her on a whim would bring her such fortune. The old man knew his place and knew when to advance and when to retreat. Over time, he became a favorite of the old man and was highly regarded by the old man. However, when he had sent out his troops, this old man had desperately tried to stop him, forcing him to withdraw his troops. His words were full of dejection, and he even said that this was a great calamity in his life. He had to give in, or else he would bring about a fatal disaster. At that time, he had already made up his mind, but this old man still didn't know his limits and shook the army's morale. In order to stabilize the morale of the army, he killed the old man, but even before he died, the old man kept telling him not to go, still repeating the words that this disaster must be left behind. He was very disdainful. He led his troops straight into the southern heavenly gate of the heavenly courts and broke through the gate into the sky. Everything had been smooth sailing, and there hadn't been any of the disasters that the old man had mentioned. This made him even more resolute in his heart. He secretly sneered that the old man had lost his mind. However, when Yizichin took out the three realms imprint, his stubborn heart suddenly grew cold. Yizichin, still holding his hand seals, naturally saw the heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity's expression. Your status is very high, and no one can compare to you. But unfortunately, I am the new ruler of the three realms. Even if you are the son of the Lady Mother of the Chariot, no, even if you are the son of the Celestial Emperor, so what? Unfortunately, this Emperor's lightning punishment doesn't belong to the myriad of laws. I'm afraid your invulnerability will be useless. The heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity's gaze trembled even more visibly. This was the first time since his birth that he felt death so close to him. That kind of coldness that was close to frost seemed to want to freeze him. His hands and feet were somewhat numb. He stared blankly at the seal in Yizichin's hand. Since you want to die, then this Emperor will fulfill your wish and grant you death. The handprint was tossed into the void, and in the blink of an eye, it fused with the heavens and earth. Suddenly, heaven and earth changed color, and the wind and clouds rolled back. The heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity's head was enveloped by ink-black clouds, accompanied by a heart-palpitating pressure. Thunderclaps rumbled in the clouds. For a moment, lightning flashed and thunder roared, as if doomsday had arrived. This tribulation was even more powerful than the previous ones. The weaker immortals couldn't help but fall to the ground, trembling. When they looked at Yizichin, their gazes were filled with terror and astonishment. The North Pole Emperor's expression shook upon hearing this, and he wanted to say something. His brother was willing to disregard old ties and selfishly send troops to the heavenly court. However, he wasn't cold-blooded. When he saw that Yizichin was about to attack the heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity, how could he just sit back and watch? Right at this moment, Swerin stopped him, and he revealed a deep gaze as he shook his head at Chen Shi. Don't make a mistake. What mistake? Although the heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity is guilty, he doesn't deserve to die. Am I supposed to just watch as my clan brother dies to this heavenly lightning? If you want the heavenly court to be leaderless in the future, then go ahead. As he spoke, Swerin released him. When the North Pole Emperor heard this, his heart trembled. When he looked at Yizichin, he discovered that Yizichin was also looking at him. When their eyes met, he couldn't help but feel a chill run from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. He forcefully swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Do you see? The current Emperor Yi is no longer the Emperor Yi you and I know. The current him is the ruler of the three realms, the one who controls the lifeblood of the three realms. The heavenly Emperor of supreme polarity has provoked him countless times, provoking his imperial might. Never mind you, even if the Lady Mother of the Chariot were to come back to life and plead for mercy on his behalf, the result wouldn't be the same. When he saw the North Pole Emperor retreat, Swerin sighed in disappointment. It wasn't just the North Pole Emperor and Swerin. The immortals closest to Yizichen, such as the god of thunder and Neza, sensed something strange about Yizichen. Yizichen's gaze overlooked heaven and earth, his indifference to all living beings. This made it difficult for them to connect the current Yizichen with the previous Yizichen. Was this really the same person? Thunder rumbled and fierce winds howled. As he sensed this profound pressure, the despairing heavenly Emperor of supreme polarity's eyes blazed with blazing flames. Then you're welcome to try. Rumble. Boundless spiritual pressure radiated from the heavenly Emperor of supreme polarity's body to fight back against the lightning. His silver eyes flashed, and the mark on his forehead radiated with dazzling light. Wisps of blood energy seeped out of his body. The immortals were astonished. After all, even the immortals here had no way of communicating with the heavenly Tao. Yet the heavenly Emperor of supreme polarity could? This was truly astonishing. Yizichen didn't care. The great Tao of destruction was a supreme great Tao. It had its own privileges. Roiling spiritual pressure howled through the air like howling winds. The heavenly Emperor of supreme polarity's silver hair fell to his shoulders, and his sleeves fluttered. He stared intently at Yizichen, his gaze unyielding. He could die, but he absolutely couldn't allow himself to die without any resistance. So what if he was the master of the three realms? So what if he had 70% of the Lady Mother of the Chariot's spiritual power? He was the heavenly Emperor of supreme polarity. He controlled the lives and deaths of all living beings. His pride prevented him from lowering his head. Besides, he was no longer young. He was now a proud son of the great Tao of destruction. It was true that the Three Realms hand seal contained 70% of the Lady Mother of the Chariot's spiritual power, but he refused to believe that Yizichen had somehow gotten lucky and obtained a nameless scoundrel like the hand seal. He hadn't lost yet. He really did want to know just how strong the Lady Mother of the Chariot had been. Yizichen just so happened to give him the chance. He wanted to give it a try. He'd lived in the Lady Mother of the Chariot's shadow ever since he was a child. He wanted to let all living beings know. He wasn't the Lady Mother of the Chariot's eldest son. He was the heavenly Emperor of supreme polarity. Come on! The arrogant roar was like a clap of thunder that shook the world. His silver pupils were mixed with wisps of blood, and the blood on his arms and neck exploded. His soaring heroism seemed to disperse the thunderclouds overhead. When Yizichen saw this, he couldn't help but sigh in admiration. No wonder he was the heavenly Emperor of supreme polarity. Even though he was arrogant and egotistical, at this moment, his battle intent soared to the heavens. But it was enough to amaze everyone. The distant immortals seemed to be infected by the heavenly Emperor of supreme polarity's heroism. Their hearts filled with admiration. But no matter what he did, his outcome was death. However, his heroism changed Yizichen's mind. He'd originally wanted to humiliate him. He might as well give him a quick death. Yizichen gathered his thoughts, narrowed his eyes, and snorted. Chapter 1016. Chapter 1016. Soul Devourer. Behind an ancient, towering tree, a few faint panting sounds could be heard. Their panting was short and thin, and it was obvious they were doing their utmost to control their breathing. Ha! I never would have guessed. After a long while, a low, sinister voice came from behind the ancient tree. Then they saw Jiangchen, still covered in blood, leaning against the tree trunk. His eyes were bloodshot as he greedily inhaled the air around him. By his side, Ho Ching was in a similar state. His entire body was drenched in sweat, and his expression was one of shock as he peered through a crack in the tree's canopy. Only Hanba sat there in a daze, as if she'd lost her soul. She didn't say a single word. The instant Yi Zichen appeared, the zombie progenitors sensed that something was wrong. When they saw him obliterate Black Dragon, they didn't hesitate at all and fled in panic. They had no clear escape route, so all they could think of was to run. Several hours passed. From day to night, they didn't have any rest as they ran. After confirming that no one was chasing them, they found a lush forest to hide in. Even so, they kept a vigilant eye on the outside, afraid that the demonic Yi Zichen would find them. We can finally rest for a while. After confirming that there were no pursuers, Ho Ching finally relaxed and sat on the ground with a long sigh. Yi Zichen's graceful slash had left a deep impression on the minds of the zombie progenitors. In the face of that sword strike, they couldn't summon any will to resist, and they didn't think that they could survive that sword strike. Didn't Yi Zichen die in the lightning tribulation? We saw it with our own eyes. How could he have come back? Ho Ching cursed angrily. His hatred for Yi Zichen had already reached a boiling point. Jiangchen, who'd recovered some of his strength, rose to his feet. He gently moved the grass, each as tall as a person, and peered through a crack in the ancient path. Who knows? But one thing's for sure, if we run into him, we'll definitely die. Even the Black Dragon, a heavenly sovereign, died under his sword, not to mention us. We can't let him capture us. If we're captured, we'll definitely die a horrible death. This was absolutely the truth. Back when he'd dealt with Black Dragon, he'd wanted to resolve the Three Realms conflict as quickly as possible, which was why he hadn't attacked them. Ho Ching deeply agreed. Soon after, a worried look appeared on his face. Big Brother Jiangchen is right, but no matter how we run, do you think we can escape the Three Realms? Sooner or later, we'll still be caught by him, and when that time comes, it'll be difficult for us to escape death. Look at Hanba, he's obviously scared out of his wits by that sword. Jiangchen glanced at Hidorigami's expressionless eyes. When he did, a dark light flashed through his eyes. He nodded with a solemn expression and returned to the side of the ancient tree. We can't just sit around and wait for death. How about this, you stand guard for me? I haven't completely fused with Ingo's soul yet. Give me some time to fully fuse with it. Then, even if Yi Zichen comes, I'll be able to fight him. Also, I'll leave Hanba in your care. When he heard that, Ho Ching's eyes flashed inexplicably, but he hid it well. He nodded solemnly. All right, I'll leave everything to you, big brother. Jiangchen nodded wordlessly. Then, without any hesitation, he sat cross-legged on the ground. Ripples of spiritual energy swirled around him. As he sensed the ripples, a sinister smile tugged at Ho Ching's lips. An hour passed. During this time, Ho Ching seemed to be on guard, but in reality, he was observing Jiangchen. Yi Zichen's sudden rise to power had already made him feel a deep sense of danger. Based on his sword alone, Jiangchen and Ingo couldn't resist him at all. Their current safety was only temporary. So long as Yi Zichen really wanted to find them, they wouldn't be able to escape death even if they hid at the ends of the earth. He, Ho Ching, didn't want to die here. He wanted to live. All he had to do was gather all of Denglong's soul and seize his true body. Only then would he become the primordial vicious beast Denglong. When that happened, no matter how invincible Yi Zichen was, he wouldn't be a match for him. He stared intently at Jiangchen. If he attacked, he had to kill him in one strike. If he failed, there would be no end to his troubles. Buzz! At that moment, a wave of spiritual energy, even more powerful than before, burst forth from Jiangchen's body. His face gradually twisted in unbearable pain. He's condensing his soul. Ho Ching watched all this unfold. He licked his lips, then his expression darkened. Die! He roared inwardly. His right hand transformed into a sharp claw and swiped viciously at the top of Jiangchen's head. However, the instant he made his move, a smile tugged at the corners of the pained Jiangchen's mouth. His eyes snapped open. Finally, I can't hold it in any longer. Cough. With a sinister laugh, Jiangchen's right hand pierced right through Hoqing's chest. Fresh blood gushed out of the gaping hole in his chest. His expression was one of astonishment. He'd been tricked. When condensing a soul, one's soul had to completely merge with it. There was no way to see the outside world. In order to make sure nothing went wrong, he'd deliberately chosen this moment to attack. Yet Jiangchen had managed to open his eyes. It was obvious he hadn't been condensing his soul at all. You! By now, Hoqing was speechless. He could feel his soul being torn apart, as if it were about to be extracted from his body. I went to great lengths to get your soul, said Jiangchen with a grin. Jiangchen grinned, then reached out with his right hand and grabbed the two souls from Hoqing's body. So you really did attack Hanba? Hoqing's face was filled with terror. He struggled with all his might, but he couldn't break free. Instantly, as if he'd accepted his fate, he gave up resisting. He glared at Jiangchen and roared, "When did you start suspecting me?" "The moment I laid eyes on Hanba." Jiangchen clenched Hoqing's soul in his palm and snorted. "Did you think I couldn't tell that Hanba was already a soulless puppet? I never would have guessed you'd be so ambitious. You swallowed Hanba's soul but didn't fuse with it. Were you afraid I'd find out? But didn't you know I was the main body? I can't accept this," Hoqing roared. He'd planned this for so long, and even obtained Hanba's soul. He could clearly exist forever, but… Jiangchen snorted when he saw the sinister expression on the man's face. "Don't worry. It's already a pity I didn't get the beast god's soul. For the sake of our shared lives, you should just obediently fuse with me." Chapter 10:17. Battle of Supreme Polarity. Rumble. Muffled, heart-palpitating thunder rumbled through the sky. As soon as Yi Zichen finished speaking, a purple lightning dragon tore through the sky. From its roar, it was clear that its only goal was to kill the heavenly emperor of Supreme Polarity. Supreme Polarity 8 trigrams. The heavenly emperor of Supreme Polarity's eyes were bloodshot as he clapped his hands together. Suddenly, an 8 trigrams formation appeared beneath his feet. However, as soon as it appeared, it shrunk the surrounding space. In the blink of an eye, it shrunk to a size no more than 3 meters wide. As he watched the 8 trigrams formation shrink, the heavenly emperor of Supreme Polarity steeled his resolve and bit his lip. A drop of somewhat bewitching purple blood appeared on the tip of his right index finger. Then, together with the drop of blood, he rubbed the mark between his eyebrows. Instantly, it was as if a third eye had opened between his brows. His aura soared to an incomparable level. Soul ignition. The North Pole Emperor's face drained of color. His heart trembled. This was a secret art that belonged to their bloodlines. Both burning their blood essence and soul could increase their strength. However, blood essence could be replenished, but burning one's soul was akin to risking one's life. Even if the heavenly emperor of Supreme Polarity could block the lightning dragon, he'd never be able to advance a single inch further on the path of cultivation. Truly, this emperor, open! Boom! As soon as his third eye opened, the 8 trigrams formation beneath his feet broke through the spatial shackles and expanded to a size of over 3,000 meters. He stood in the center of the formation, which revolved clockwise beneath his feet. Rise! With an explosive roar, the veins on the heavenly emperor of Supreme Polarity's arms bulged. His hands remained in the air as the formation passed through his body and hovered above his head. The black and white formation eyes of each side rested on his left and right hands respectively. He was really going all out. Whether it was his fear of his mother's 70% spiritual power, or the chill in his heart caused by the roaring thunder dragon in the sky, he had no choice but to put his life on the line to fight against this thunder dragon. Although that was the case, all of this happened in the time it takes a spark to fly off a flint. When Yi Zichen saw this, he couldn't help but arch his brows. He couldn't help but glance at the heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity's actions. The 8 trigrams formation above his head was like an indestructible mountain towering in the sky. He's comprehended the grand Tao of destruction, yet he's mastered the 8 trigrams of Supreme Polarity, combining strength and gentleness. The heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity's ambitions aren't small. No wonder he's stagnated on the grand Tao of destruction for so many years despite his monstrous talent. If he had simply comprehended the grand Tao of destruction, he might have ascended and become a god a long time ago. Yi Zichen marveled inwardly. An existence like that was actually a great thing for the 3 realms. However, the heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity was far too arrogant. He had no sense of propriety and was brimming with ambition. As a result, this joyous occasion became a disaster. We can't let him live. Yi Zichen snorted inwardly, then formed a hand seal and carved a few characters into the air. The moment the rune was completed, it left the void and rushed towards the lightning dragon in the sky, fusing with it. Those glyphs were used to strengthen the lightning dragon. If he hadn't done that, Yi Zichen was worried that the lightning dragon wouldn't have been able to kill the heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity in one blow. How? The lightning dragon roared. As the glyphs entered its body, the lightning dragon in the sky seemed to open its eyes. The roaring azure dragon circled the heavens, its roar echoing endlessly in the air. The azure clouds swirled in reverse, as if the end of the world had arrived. When the immortals in the distance heard the dragon's roar, their faces turned as white as paper. The lightning dragon's sudden eruption stunned them. By now, they didn't even dare look at the newly opened lightning dragon. Their hearts pounded wildly. As soon as the heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity erupted, they felt a boundless sense of powerlessness. That was especially true of North Pole. He'd fought the heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity before, but when he saw the 8 formation diagram, he realized that the heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity hadn't used his true strength at all. If the heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity had used the diagram earlier, the heavenly court might have fallen long ago. When they saw the lightning dragon Yi Zichen released, they felt a deep sense of helplessness. They couldn't help but sigh inwardly. This was a fight between immortals. Compared to Yi Zichen and the heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity, their previous battle was nothing more than child's play. I am impervious to all techniques, and my soul is indestructible. All living beings are subservient to this Emperor, and the laws of heaven and earth are played in the palm of this Emperor's hand. I have comprehended the great Tao of destruction and mastered the 5 elements of Supreme Polarity. You want to kill me? Dream on. The heavenly Emperor of Supreme Polarity roared defiantly, then clasped his hands together. The instant his hands met, the black and white eyes of the Supreme Polarity formation fused into one. A ball of light, as black as the sun, emerged from his palms. If you want to die, then die. The immortals looked at the black sun. The moment they saw the black sun, they saw endless sorrow under it. Mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The sky shattered. This was obviously what would happen after the sunset. Suddenly, the immortals could no longer sit still. The longer one lived, the more they feared death. They'd already sensed the onslaught of death. How could they possibly sit still? Destroy that sun! Shouted someone from the crowd of immortals. His words instantly stirred up 1,000 ripples. Countless immortals voiced their agreement. They unleashed a barrage of magical treasures and spiritual techniques. They wanted to shatter the falling sun. Impudent! At that moment, Yi Zichen glared at them angrily. With a wave of his hand, he shattered all the magical treasures and spiritual techniques. The immortals in the distance coughed up several mouthfuls of blood. They looked at Yi Zichen with unwillingness and terror. You've got some discerning eyes. The heavenly emperor of supreme polarities, silver hair, danced in the wind like a mad demon. When he saw Yi Zichen shatter all the magical treasures and spiritual techniques, he snorted. I knew the world-destroying sun would explode if it came into contact with spiritual energy, but so what? This sun is a battle technique I created after pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into comprehending the great Tao of destruction and the great Tao of supreme polarity. Do you really think you can break it? The only one who can scatter it is me. If you want the three realms to survive, you have to leave me alive. The heavenly emperor of supreme polarity's tone was soft, but Yi Zichen heard every single word. He smiled faintly with a cold expression on his face. Is that so? As soon as he finished speaking, he pointed at the falling sun, and a huge hand that blotted out the sky suddenly appeared in the sky. It grabbed the sun and then disappeared. That's impossible. When he saw this, the heavenly emperor of supreme polarity trembled, as if he'd contracted a fever. He couldn't believe Yi Zichen had broken his near-invincible battle technique in such a way. I refuse to accept this. The heavenly emperor of supreme polarity let out a shrill, furious roar. He seemed to have descended into madness. He bit off his finger. Instantly, boundless blood energy and murderous intent emanated from his body. Chapter 10:18. A shocking change. His finger was bitten off. A bloody mist spread from the heavenly emperor of supreme polarity's finger. The supreme polarity 8 trigrams formation above his head began to devour the blood energy he released. In the blink of an eye, the 8 trigrams formation flashed with a demonic light. But no matter how many tricks he used, his roar was louder than thunder. In the eyes of the immortals present, this was nothing more than a desperate counterattack on the brink of death. The lightning dragon roared as it descended. The winds and clouds howled as it shook the heavens. The dragon's eyes glowed with heavenly lightning. It stared intently at the 8 trigrams formation in front of it, then brazenly charged forward. In an instant, the formation's formation disc cracked. Countless cracks spread out from the formation plate. The formation plate was on the verge of collapsing. Condense. The heavenly emperor of supreme polarity's eyes were bloodshot. He bit off another finger. His blood energy gushed out, nourishing the 8 trigrams formation like fertilizer. However, it was no longer of much use. After several breaths of time, the heavenly emperor of supreme polarity's face was as white as a sheet of paper. He didn't have enough blood energy to maintain the formation. Boom. The formation shattered. The heavenly dragon formed from tribulation lightning roared, its maw wide open as if it wanted to swallow him whole. The instant the formation shattered, the heavenly emperor of supreme polarity coughed up several mouthfuls of blood. He collapsed to the ground, his expression dispirited. As he watched the lightning dragon about to swallow him whole, he let out a thunderous roar. I am impervious to all techniques, immortal and undying. I refuse to accept this. As he roared arrogantly, the heavenly emperor of supreme polarity directed all his spiritual energy to his heart. Boom. He self-detonated. The lightning dragon that was about to swallow him was smashed to pieces by the explosion. Everything within 1,000 miles transformed into a field of lightning. Snakes of lightning surged within the pool, flickering with frightening light. After a long while, the heavenly emperor of supreme polarity's dying roar reverberated in everyone's ears. When they saw the heavenly emperor of supreme polarity devoured by the lightning dragon, not even his ashes remained. They couldn't help but feel a sense of desolation. The heavenly emperor of supreme polarity, once a proud son of heaven, revered by all in the 3 realms, had ended his life in such a manner. Supreme polarity. In the distance, the North Pole Emperor's eyes flashed with sorrow. When he saw the heavenly emperor of supreme polarity's self-detonation, he couldn't help but redden. Once upon a time, this elder brother of his was an existence that he had always looked up to. The immortals of the underworld and immortal region weren't particularly excited. The rebellion had indeed ended, and Yi Zichen had sentenced the traitors to death in the lightning tribulation. However, in their hearts, they somewhat disagreed with Yi Zichen's judgment. Most of the traitors who'd been sentenced to death were high-ranking members of their respective realms. Killing all of them would be a huge blow to the strength of their respective realms. The traitors have all been killed. At this moment, a voice that seemed to have emerged from the abyss reverberated in everyone's ears. I hope that everyone will not have any rebellious thoughts. Remember what happened to them and do not go astray. These words went straight to the depths of the immortals' hearts. The immortals couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts, and they nodded repeatedly in agreement. Yi Zichen took in the immortals' expressions, then waved his hand and opened a door. Then return to your respective realms and perform your duties. The immortals retreated. Even after the immortals had left, Yi Zichen, who'd maintained a cold, emotionless expression, found it hard to disguise his bitterness. He leaned against a stone pillar and looked at the dazzling blood red in the midst of the white. He looked at the devastation caused by the lightning tribulation. Did I avenge you? Yi Zichen took a cigarette from his pocket, took a drag, and muttered to himself. He really had killed all of the traitors. He hadn't left a single one alive. It was also because of their existence that the people of the three realms hadn't reached the beast region in time. Whether it was them or the demon's black dragon, Yi Zichen had killed them all. However, he didn't have the confidence to say that he'd avenged them. He couldn't live the rest of his life without regret. So long as he closed his eyes, he'd see images of Su Yun undergoing the 8 ultimate spiritual ascension. So long as he closed his eyes, he'd see images of Xia Kiki brazenly resisting the heavenly lightning. So long as he closed his eyes, the images of those who sacrificed their lives for him and others echoed in his mind. These scenes continued to linger in his mind, lingering for a long time, unable to be erased. Only when the cigarette between his fingers burned out and the burning sensation was transmitted to his nerves did he get up from the ground with a bitter smile. But at this moment the phone in Yi Zichen's pocket vibrated for the first time in a long time. He took it out and saw that it was a message from Su Yan. Yi Zichen's expression instantly darkened. I didn't come looking for you, but you came looking for me. Su Luer stood in the air above Dragon City in a blue dress. Her beautiful face flickered with cold light. The falling snow danced in the howling wind. In an instant, the area outside Dragon City turned into a world of ice and snow. 1,000 miles of ice. Spikes of ice erupted from the ground, and countless experts of the beast race in the sky above Dragon City stared at the 10,000-foot-tall behemoth outside, their hearts thumping wildly. In this world of ice and snow, there was a petite figure under the cover of the spikes, constantly approaching the gigantic beast. Falling flower palm. Her fair, white palm slammed into the beast's back. Flower petals fell and withered as she waved them. The petals were extremely corrosive, but when they landed on the beast's back, they merely produced a puff of white smoke. The beast wasn't harmed in the slightest. Humph! The giant beast let out a snort and slapped its back with its palm. Sensing danger approaching, the woman imprinted on the beast's back had no time to wonder why the petals hadn't corroded the beast. She leapt into the distance. Up in the sky, Su Luer frowned and pointed with her right hand. Ice tiger. The swirling snow instantly condensed into an ice tiger, which lunged at the beast. When it saw the ice tiger approach, the beast gave up on the woman and smashed the ice tiger to pieces. Many thanks, Empress. The retreating woman cupped her hands at Su Luer. Su Luer nodded but said nothing. Instead, she stared intently at the beast in the distance. It wasn't just Su Luer. Every living being in Dragon City felt an immense pressure emanating from the beast. Lil Yan. I've already sent Yi Zichen a message. He's on his way, said Su Yan. Su Yan pursed her lips. The moment the beast appeared, Su Luer told Su Yan to contact Yi Zichen. Even though she'd already passed divine tribulation, she really didn't know how to deal with it. Chapter 10-19. Face death. Wind and snow billowed. The violent snowstorm howled along with the howling wind. The area within 1,000 miles of Dragon City was frozen by the snowstorm. The people of Dragon City holed up inside the city walls. It wasn't that they hadn't tried to attack the beast, but that none of their spiritual techniques could shake it in the slightest. Helpless, they could only rely on Su Lu's ice and snow to slow it down. What on earth is going on? Where did this beast come from? Do the demons still have something up their sleeves? The demon commander died in battle. If the demons really had a beast like this, why didn't they summon it earlier? This savage beast is far stronger than the black dragon of the demon race. There were many different opinions. Everyone, who had survived the calamity, had yet to recover from their emotions. The appearance of this ferocious beast made them feel endless despair. The beast was thousands of feet long. Even among the beast region's sacred ancestors, only they could compare to it. Wait a moment. A weak voice called out from the crowd. Everyone looked over and saw the Tiango clan's White Emperor. He was being supported by his clansmen to Dragon City's walls. His luck was a bit better. Black Dragon had only heavily injured him and knocked him unconscious, but hadn't killed him. After Yi Zichen killed Black Dragon, the Tiango clansmen immediately went looking for him. When they discovered he wasn't dead, the entire clan leapt for joy. The clan elders spared no effort in saving him. Finally, White Emperor regained consciousness. When the people of Dragon City saw that White Emperor had arrived, they cupped their hands in greeting. Of all the peak-level clans, only the head of the Tiango clan was still alive. In the face of everyone's greetings, White Emperor nodded slightly. However, his gaze remained fixed on the distant beast. As time passed, his face grew paler and paler. The onlookers noticed the change in his expression and couldn't help but ask what was wrong. "Your Excellency White Emperor, what's wrong?" White Emperor was silent. After a while, he frowned, his expression dark. "If I'm not mistaken, this beast. I'm afraid it's the primordial vicious beast Denglong's true form." When the people of the beast region heard this, their expressions shook. Even Su Lu, who was maintaining the blizzard, couldn't help but tremble. The vicious beast Denglong. As people of the beast region, especially those from peak-level clans, how could they not know of Denglong's fearsome reputation? That was a ferocious beast that had existed since the beginning of the world. Not even the living beings of the God clan could do anything to it. However, it was rumored that the ferocious beast had caused Nuwa's soul to split into 3 parts. How could it be reformed now? "Sir, are you sure?" The people of the beast region frowned. If this really was an ancient Denglong, what was there to resist? Although they did not know how powerful the fierce beast Denglong was, they were certain that it was not something they could deal with. Bai Di frowned. He did not wish for this to be the fierce beast Denglong. He also thought that he had seen wrongly. But, I'm sure. This emperor's race has records of the fierce beast Denglong. Fierce beast Denglong's true form is that of a dog. It's completely icy blue, and it has a purple tail and unicorn legs. All of this matches the enormous beast before us. Then what should we do? The people on Dragon City were all in trouble. This was an ancient vicious beast, and for the sake of resisting the demon race, they already suffered heavy losses. Could it be that they would be able to defeat the ferocious ancient fierce beast Denglong with the remnants of their army? That was obviously impossible. Thud. Its heavy footsteps caused everyone's hearts to palpitate. When the fierce beast Denglong was 100 meters away from Dragon City, it stopped. "Tell Nuwa to come see me." Denglong spat out the truth. Its voice was like a clap of thunder in everyone's ears. It was so deafening that even the deaf could hear it. Some of the weaker ones even curled up on the ground as their ears bled from the sound transmission. This angry roar plunged those who still held on to hope into despair. If it could mention Nuwa, then it was undoubtedly the fierce beast Denglong. But since it was the fierce beast Denglong, it clearly wasn't from the demon race. The person it was looking for was Nuwa. Lord Denglong, this is the lower three realms. Lady Nuwa is not here, said one of the people of Dragon City. Someone from Dragon City spoke up. In order to say these words, that person mustered up all of his courage. Their only hope was that once the fierce beast heard them, it would leave. Then contact Nuwa and tell her to come see me, said the fierce beast Denglong. Another deafening chant came from Huey's mouth. Everyone in Dragon City felt their blood and spirit seize tremble when they heard it. The person who'd spoken just now coughed up a mouthful of blood essence and fainted. Su Luer spoke up. His Excellency Denglong already knows that this place is an abandoned land. Lady Nuwa is the goddess of the god race. How could we possibly contact her? Is that so? Your Excellency, please understand. As an ancient divine beast, you naturally know more than we do. Even the haughty Empress Su Luer humbled herself, and even subconsciously tried to say nice things. Especially when she said Denglong was an ancient divine beast, not an ancient one. Little Nuwa really knows how to talk. The fierce beast Denglong looked up into the sky. Su Luer didn't hesitate in the slightest. She cupped her hands and said, Your Excellency, please let us go. We won't get involved in the conflict between you and Nuwa. Why should I let you go? To everyone's surprise, the seemingly satisfied Denglong suddenly changed the topic. His eyes flashed. It's been a long time since I've eaten humans, so I'll use you as a sumptuous feast. Who knows, I might even be able to lure Nuwa down here. As for who I'll eat, let's start with you, little girl. The fierce beast opened its bloody maw, and a boundless devouring power emerged. Su Luer, who stood in the sky, felt the space around her tear at her. Big sister, cried Su Yen. The others clenched their fists, sweating on Su Luer's behalf. However, not a single one of them took advantage of this opportunity to attack Denglong. They simply didn't have the courage. If you still want to resist, then let me devour you. Become one with me. That would be an unparalleled honor for you. As he spoke, the fierce beast Denglong tore at Su Luer even more forcefully. She forcibly stabilized herself, her face contorted in pain. She was clearly at her limit. Whoosh! In a moment of carelessness, Su Luer slid 100 meters toward Denglong. At that moment, a streak of sword light appeared, threatening to shatter the heavens. The sword light unfurled like a golden fan, slashing viciously at the fierce beast Denglong from the horizon. Denglong didn't dare be careless. In a panic, he dodged into the distance. Wherever the sword light passed, the ground was cleaved in two, leaving behind a bottomless chasm. At the same time, a sword-wielding man appeared by Su Luer's side. Above his blade, the word Xianyuan was engraved. Emperor Yi. The people above Dragon City instantly cheered. When she saw Yi Zichen, Su Luer said coolly, I'll leave it to you. I'll leave it to you. Yi Zichen nodded at her, then pointed his sword forward. Chapter 1020. Chapter 1020. Heaven-plundering seconds strike. A deafening roar echoed through the air. Yi Zichen stood in the sky and looked down at the primordial beast. Its roar was like a peal of thunder, so loud that even the 9 heavens were terrified. Waves of fury rolled back the clouds, and a peerless divine might bore down on Denglong like a mountain. Yi Zichen. The 10,000-foot beast's eyes flashed with a dark light. Even after his soul reformed, Denglong still retained the zombie progenitor's memories. That sword strike, which seemed capable of cleaving heaven and earth in half, shook him to the core. He didn't dare underestimate it in the slightest. Everyone in Dragon City sensed Denglong's unease. Yi Zichen's position in their hearts rose even higher. In their eyes, Yi Zichen was the most dazzling of heavenly gods. Do you see that? That's my boss. Little White of the Tiango clan excitedly patted the person next to him on the shoulder, as if saying that wasn't enough. After patting that person's shoulder, he patted the others around him as well. Zhuemo of the treasure tower gazed up into the sky, her gaze brimming with undisguisable reverence. Li Jiai, Su Yen, Lu Lu. They were all delighted by Yi Zichen's strength. However, they'd experienced life and death together. Their gazes were filled with mixed emotions and sorrow. In short, everyone in Dragon City wore different expressions, but in their hearts they all shared the same dream. When you ran away like a stranger than anyone else, did you really think that just because you recondensed your soul, you'd have the right to challenge me? Yi Zichen's expression was indifferent as he spoke. He pointed the Xianyuan sword at Denglong. His surging battle intent soared to a peak, and the number 1 divine artifact of the primordial era, the Xianyuan sword, let out a resonant cry. Boom! He swung his sword casually. A streak of sword energy tore through the air and flattened a distant mountain range. When Denglong saw this, his scalp went numb. Waves of white air puffed out of his nostrils, and his hooves rubbed against the ground uneasily. He was uneasy. Yi Zichen, don't think too highly of yourself. The vicious beast Denglong spat out the truth. Its camel-sized eyes stared fixedly at Yi Zichen in the sky and roared. You've only just crossed the divine tribulation and haven't even finished converting your divine power. Do you think you're a match for me? I advise you not to make a mistake. Call Nuwa over, and I can spare your life. Noisy. Yi Zichen didn't appreciate Denglong's kind advice. His eyes narrowed into thin lines as spiritual energy surged out of his body, causing the 9 heavens to rumble endlessly. Step forward and die. Boom. A sudden clap of thunder boomed through the sky. Denglong stared intently at Yi Zichen, who'd stepped into the sky like a heavenly deity. Even though he had condensed his soul once more, it was still not enough time for him to merge his soul and soul together. As a result, he wasn't particularly confident in facing Yi Zichen. But what kind of existence was it? It was an ancient ferocious beast that had been born since the beginning of the world. Even in the upper realm, it was infamous. How could it tolerate being berated like this? Courting death. A monstrous, murderous aura erupted from its body, instantly enveloping everything within a 10,000-mile radius in a blood-colored mist. Everyone felt as if they'd stepped into an ancient battlefield. It was as if countless vicious beasts were roaring in their ears, and their hearts trembled. Yi Zichen, who was facing Denglong directly, had the most direct experience. In fact, he felt as if he were facing a supremely ferocious beast hundreds of thousands of feet tall, its head reaching the heavens and its feet trampling the earth. Its ferocious maw could swallow the heavens and devour the earth, but in front of it, he was no more than an insignificant ant. Insignificant tricks. Yi Zichen merely snorted, brushed his left hand over his sword, and raised it high above his head. Heaven plundering strike. In an instant, a golden fan of sword light sliced through the blood mist. The sword light seemed capable of cleaving heaven and earth in half. When Denglong saw it, his eyelids twitched. He tried to dodge, but to his surprise, the sword light split apart just as it was about to reach him. It transformed into countless strands of golden sword energy and attacked him from all directions. There was no way to dodge, no way to retreat. He could only face it head-on. Boom! When the sword light landed on Denglong's body, an explosion louder than thunder rumbled through the heavens. The light was so blinding that no one dared look directly at it. The golden light seemed to tear a hole in the heavens. Fierce winds swept through the area. Even in the face of the shockwaves, the Sky Immortal experts held their breath. As for those who hadn't yet reached the Sky Immortal level, they were almost sent flying. Did he win? After a while, the golden light dissipated. The people of Dragon City couldn't help but ask. They stared intently at Denglong. Su Lu'er and Bai Di stared at Yi Zichen in astonishment. They were both past the Immortal King level, and they could sense that Denglong's attack was several times stronger than the one he'd used to slay Black Dragon. However, their astonishment lasted only a brief moment. Their gazes fell on Denglong. Compared to Yi Zichen's strength, they cared more about Denglong's survival. When the sword light dissipated, they saw a 10,000-foot wide crater. White smoke was still rising from the deep pit. Under the expectant gazes of the people of Dragon City, they saw a claw reaching out from the deep pit. "It's not dead." Su Luer and the White Emperor were dumbfounded by what they saw. They asked themselves honestly, even if they used their essence power and burned their souls and blood essence, they couldn't unleash an attack on the same level as Yi Zichen's attack. Even a pinnacle heavenly supreme would die under that sword. But it wasn't just Bai Di and Su Luer. When Yi Zichen saw Denglong crawl out of the crater, he frowned. He'd comprehended this sword technique from his godhead after undergoing divine tribulation. This sword technique possessed supreme offensive power. Just now, he hadn't held back in the slightest. Strike while it's down. Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes. When he saw that Denglong still hadn't fully crawled out of the crater, he didn't hesitate. Buzz. When he raised the Xianyuan sword, the sky changed color. The clouds howled, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. The sword spirit, Xianyuan Xiang, sensed his thoughts and rebuked him angrily. "Kid, you're crazy. The second heaven plundering stance isn't something you can use right now." Xianyuan Xiang, who'd completely fused with her godhead, was well aware of the requirements for the second heaven plundering stance. It required at least the divine power of a sky supreme. If Yi Zichen tried to forcibly use it, he'd be seeking death. Yi Zichen naturally knew that, given his current strength, he could only use the first heaven plundering stance as he pleased. However, the first heaven plundering stance couldn't obliterate Denglong. Even if he used it again, the result would be the same. In that case, he might as well use his remaining spiritual energy to try again. When he considered this, Yi Zichen no longer hesitated. His eyes turned bloodshot, and he spat out a mouthful of blood essence onto his sword. Chapter 10:21. Soul stripping. As soon as Yi Zichen called out the technique's name, boundless spiritual energy of heaven and earth gathered around him. The ground outside Dragon City began to crumble, sending rubble flying into the air. Countless veins of the earth appeared before everyone's eyes. The spiritual energy of the veins seemed to transform into tangible water that flowed into Yi Zichen's blade. "Split the heavens!" Boom! Yi Zichen swung the Xianyuan sword viciously. Unlike the first strike of the heaven plundering strike, this one didn't emit a blinding golden light. All the onlookers felt was a ripple in space, then saw the surrounding space split open. A gash appeared in the sky. Through it they could see darkness and desolation that didn't belong to this world. He really split heaven and earth in half. The people above Dragon City could no longer express their shock with words. The only thing they could do was gulp. They looked at the gaping hole in the sky, and also paid attention to the fierce beast Denglong's fate. After unleashing the second strike of the heaven plundering strike, Yi Zichen covered his mouth with his left hand. When he opened his palm, he saw a pool of golden red blood. Given his current strength, unleashing such a technique was clearly beyond what he could endure. Denglong, who just crawled out of the crater, sensed the spatial ripples in front of him, and his pupils constricted. However, the plundering the heavens style had already caused damage to his internal organs, and his movements were very slow. By the time he tried to retreat, it was already too late. "Roar!" Denglong roared in fury. When the onlookers heard it, they instantly fell into a daze. Their ears rang. Sword light pierced through his body. Denglong watched unwillingly as the sword light pierced through his body. To his surprise, the sword light didn't do any actual damage to him. It merely pierced through his soul. After the people in Dragon City calmed themselves down, they were shocked to see this scene. The sword technique that could split heaven and earth in half had no effect on Denglong at all. How is this possible? Both the experts of the Beast region and the Immortal region paled. They couldn't believe this was how things had turned out. Denglong looked up into the sky in a daze. When he noticed the blood seeping out of Yi Zichen's fingers, he let out an incomparably savage, maniacal laugh. Yi Zichen, I already warned you not to be too full of yourself. Danglong laughed maniacally, then walked out of the crater indifferently. As he stepped through the air, he looked at Yi Zichen with disdain. Really? In response, Yi Zichen merely smiled coldly, then looked at Danglong with the contempt of a king. Look at your feet. Trying to act mysterious. Even if I wanted to see, I could. The arrogant Qi suddenly couldn't speak. He stared blankly at the ground below him. Beneath his feet was his real body, and the one standing in the air was only his soul. You didn't expect it, did you? That sword of mine was for the sake of soul stripping. The people from Dragon City also saw this scene. Only now did they understand why the sword didn't cause any substantial damage to Danglong. It turned out that the sword's target was the soul. But they didn't understand. So what if Danglong's soul was stripped away? Danglong's 3 souls were still an unparalleled existence. Could it be that Emperor Yi had a spiritual technique specifically designed to deal with souls? Danglong was the same. When he saw Danglong's soul being stripped away, he was only slightly shocked. His body's defenses were indeed astonishing, but what truly affected him was his soul. By stripping away his soul, Danglong had indeed lost his body's supreme defensive abilities. However, in his soul form, he was invincible. Only soul-targeting techniques could harm him. Furthermore, with his 3 souls together, ordinary soul-targeting techniques were completely useless against him. From the looks of it, Danglong had the absolute advantage. I'm afraid you've made the wrong move. Danglong's soul body laughed disdainfully. He could already sense that victory was in his grasp. Is that so? Yi Zichen's reply was as indifferent as ever. Then, to everyone's astonishment, his soul emerged from his body. Emperor Yi, what are you doing? The people of Dragon City couldn't understand Yi Zichen's actions. He'd gone to great lengths to strip away Danglong's soul, but now he'd taken the initiative to extract his own soul. Not only had he gained no advantage at all, but he'd even suffered the backlash of his sword technique. No matter how they looked at it, it seemed like a loss. Danglong's soul body froze, but there was always a reason for everything. He felt like there were some details he hadn't considered. Kid, are you really going to do this? Xianyuan Xiang transmitted into his sea of consciousness. The second stance of the heaven plundering technique was supposed to be an offensive sword technique, but Yi Zichen had changed it in the process of unleashing it. When he stripped Danglong's soul, she'd realized Yi Zichen's true intentions. Yes. Yi Zichen's reply was firm. He waved his right hand, and a pearl tore through the air and landed by his side. Soul Pearl Yuan. This pearl had always been protecting Tian, but now he'd summoned it here. Everyone was even more confused. The vicious beast Danglong furrowed his brows. He had a bad feeling about this. Big Sister Xiang, tenor, I'm not the type to act arbitrarily. If you don't want to, you can say it. I can erase my imprints with you right now and let you go. Tenor blinked and shook his head. Xianyuan Xiang glared at him. Who do you think I am? A good colt doesn't serve 2 masters, and a good wife doesn't serve 2 husbands. I've been with you since your first life, and we've been through so many obstacles, big and small. When have I ever abandoned you? Tenor doesn't even need to mention it. It's a protective spiritual artifact for you, and now you're saying such things to us? What's more, if we leave, do you think you can seal Danglong's soul on your own? Xianyuan Xiang kept rolling her eyes as she walked out of the Xianyuan sword in her soul form. Tenbucks did the same. He stood by Yi Zichen's side in soul form. Yi Zichen smiled at them, but didn't say anything else. He simply nodded. Thank you very much. In the blink of an eye, Yi Zichen's expression froze. He pointed at Danglong's soul body. You immediately sensed that his soul, which had been split into 3, was on the verge of collapsing again. He tried his best to stabilize his soul, but he saw Xianyuan Xiang and Tenbucks converging on him from the left and right. By now, Danglong completely understood Yi Zichen's intentions. His eyes were filled with terror as he roared angrily. Yi Zichen, you're crazy! With that, it ignored its main body and fled into the distance. When Xianyuan Xiang and Tenbux saw this, they quickly chased after it. Yi Zichen, who'd been standing behind them this entire time, muttered indifferently. Chapter 10:22. Seal. 3 Soul Seals. Yi Zichen was going to separate Denglong's soul, which he'd painstakingly divided into 3 parts, then use his own soul to seal Denglong's main soul, while the 2 artifact spirits sealed Denglong's soul. This kind of method was basically a mutual destruction. Crazy! You're crazy! Denglong screamed madly as he fled. He'd thought of countless ways Yi Zichen could deal with him, but he never would have guessed it would be so extreme. More importantly, where did he learn this demonic technique from? Soul stripping. Seal. When Denglong heard this, it was like a soul-stealing song. Denglong's soul, which he'd painstakingly divided into 3 parts, began to struggle violently. He tried his best to gather his will back together, but to his dismay, he discovered that there was an independent will within his soul that was helping Yi Zichen separate his soul. Ho Qing. There was no need to think too much about it. This sentient soul was undoubtedly Ho Qing's. Humph, Jiangchen, you didn't expect this, did you? You spent so much effort to gather your soul, but in the end, you'll still have to separate it. Before, you were soulless, but now you've completely taken over Ingo's soul. Enjoy your endless years of being sealed away. With that, the sentient Ho Qing separated from Denglong's soul of his own accord. Denglong's soul, which he'd been trying to stabilize, fell apart. Ho Qing, you're seeking death. When he sensed Hanba and Ho Qing's souls separate, Denglong's soul trembled violently and let out a thunderous roar. When he saw Denglong's frenzied expression, Ho Qing smiled indifferently and ignored him. Instead, he gestured to Xianyuan Xiang to surrender, then turned to Denglong. Let's be sealed together. With a calm smile, Xianyuan Xiang transformed into a shackle and bound Ho Qing's soul. Hanba's soul did the same, bound by the 10 shackles. The people of Dragon City watched on in bewilderment. All they saw was Yi Zichen's soul appear as a soul, but his artifact spirit also appeared as a soul. Then they saw the spiritual body of the Denglong run, as if it had gone mad. It kept shouting that it had gone mad, and Yi Zichen's divine artifact spirit chased after it like mad. Then, they saw Denglong's soul split into 3. Denglong's voice was filled with boundless anger, and the 2 artifact spirits actually sealed the 2 separated souls. The people in Dragon City could not understand this series of events. But at this moment, Emperor Bai's expression turned serious. His soul is divided into 3. The artifact spirit and Emperor Ye's soul. Not good. Emperor Yi wants to use the artifact spirit and himself as a prison to seal Denglong. In an instant, everyone in Dragon City was stunned. Soon after, unconcealable shock appeared on their faces. What? Even as the crowd cried out in alarm, several beams of light shot into the sky and flew towards Yi Zichen and Denglong's soul bodies. Su Yan, Zuermo, Li Jiai, Lu Lu, Xiaobai, Yin Shang, Zhuge Kongming. Everyone who was familiar with Yi Zichen didn't hesitate. They all took to the skies like madmen. Zichen, I've already lost too much. I can't lose you too. Su Yan bit her lips, and tears could be seen in her eyes. Su Yun was dead. Xia Kiki was dead. She'd truly lost too much in this war. She couldn't let Yi Zichen. She didn't dare think about it. All she could do was rush to Yi Zichen's side as fast as she could and stop him. You're the heaven's chosen emperor. Don't do anything stupid. Yin Shang gnashed his teeth. Didn't you say you'd take me back to the modern realm? You can't go back on your word. Li Jiai bit her lip as well. It wasn't just them. Even Gu Zichen, who was hiding in the sky, panicked. He could no longer stay out of the fray and watch as events unfolded. Countless beams of spiritual light converged on Yi Zichen. They had only one goal: to stop him. Damn it! Damn it! Denglong roared madly. The entire sky burned with his fury. He watched in a daze as Hanba and Ho Ching were sealed, then gnashed his teeth and turned to flee. Seal! At that moment, Denglong's soul body heard a soft cry from the depths of his soul. Then, his soul came to a stop in midair, beyond his control. A cool breeze brushed past him, and he saw Yi Zichen's soul body appear before him. Yi Zichen, impressive courage. He practically gnashed his teeth as he spoke. If it weren't for the fact that the circumstances didn't allow it, he would have ground Yi Zichen's bones to dust. Back then, Nuwa merely split my soul into 3 parts. She didn't dare use her own soul to seal me. Emperor Yi, based on your courage alone, I'll call you General Yi. However, I don't understand. You have a bright future ahead of you. Is it worth it to use your own body as a prison just to seal me? If I'm sealed, won't you be the same? When your soul is destroyed, I'll still be able to escape. Do you really think that's worth it? At this point, Denglong no longer wanted to beg for mercy. Yi Zichen had already made up his mind to seal him. He didn't believe that a few words could sway someone capable of making such a decision. Besides, sealing his soul would only last for a period of time. When Yi Zichen's soul was destroyed, Denglong could still break free. Why not? I think it's worth it. Yi Zichen's answer left no room for doubt. He didn't explain at all, but that was the best explanation. There was no hint of retreat in his eyes. He was determined to do this. Denglong stared into his eyes, then nodded solemnly. By now, there was no need for him to say anything more. Yi Zichen had actually used his own soul to seal him. He submitted. Yi Zichen's soul gradually transformed into a chain. Denglong couldn't resist at all, or rather, he had no way of resisting. He obediently lowered his head, gathered his soul power, and allowed the chain to imprison his soul. Don't! Stop! Don't! Countless anxious cries rang out. Yi Zichen, still in chains, turned around and saw anxious, uneasy faces, as well as anxious shouts. Let's go. After he nodded, Xianyuan Xiang and 10 bucks, who had been guarding him, returned to their main bodies. 2 rays of light turned into flowing light and disappeared. If there were no accidents, they would forever hide in some corner of the world, forever sealing Qi's soul. Yi Zichen paused for a moment, then smiled gently at them. Then, the last strand of his soul merged with the chain. With a bang, he disappeared from everyone's line of sight. The group rushing towards Yi Zichen came to a halt the instant he disappeared. Their minds reverberated with the final transmission he'd sent them before transforming into chains. Chapter 1023. A mortal enemy. When Yi Zichen's soul transformed into a beam of starlight and disappeared, the entire world seemed to fall silent. Everyone watched this scene in silence until Yi Zichen's Zhuomo's face was pale as she sobbed hoarsely. Li Jiai bit her lip and stared blankly at where Yi Zichen had disappeared. Little White, Yin Shang, and the others clenched their fists and blinked repeatedly in an attempt to hold back their tears. However, they couldn't stop the tears from rolling down their cheeks. The people of Dragon City lowered their heads, placed their hands on their chests, and closed their eyes in silent mourning. The entire world seemed to be soaked in sorrow. For the next few hours, no one said a single word. Whoosh, whoosh. Countless figures shot through the sky. These were the experts of the 3 realms who'd returned to their respective realms and learned of Denglong's death. By the time they arrived, it was all over. All they could see was Yi Zichen and Denglong's bodies. They'd landed on the ground, but they couldn't sense even the slightest trace of their souls. Although they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they knew exactly what had happened. Day and night alternated. Whether it was the people of Dragon City or the experts of the 3 realms, they all stood silently off in the distance. At that moment, Su Lu stepped through the air and landed on Yi Zichen's body. With a wave of her hand, a crystal coffin appeared before everyone's eyes. Su Lu's spiritual power lifted Yi Zichen's body into the crystal coffin. At the same time, the immortals of Dragon City, and the three realms arrived before the coffin. Without any communication whatsoever, they bowed deeply to Yi Zichen's body. Yi Zichen, you deserve to die. It was in this heavy atmosphere that an angry rebuke suddenly rang out. Everyone looked to see a silver-haired woman stand before the crystal coffin. She gnashed her teeth and glared at Yi Zichen, who lay peacefully in the coffin. Who do you think you are? Ha! Do you know who gave you your life? Heroism? Who do you think you are? You're dead, but everyone in the world remembers you. How laughable! The woman slandered Yi Zichen one after another. Her words were especially ear-piercing to the others. Yi Zichen had died for their sake. Not only were they ungrateful, but now they were even slandering him. Some people in the crowd started to stand up in anger, wanting to reason with him. However, before they could take a few steps, they were stopped by the people around them. Why are you stopping me? Emperor Yi sacrificed himself for us, but that woman doesn't know what's good for her and even slandered him. Regardless of whether she's grateful or not, doesn't she know that the dead are the most important? Look who that person is. I don't care who she is. Even if she has a powerful background, I will still teach her a lesson. Disregarding the crowd's attempts to dissuade him, the resentful man took a few steps forward. Before he could say anything, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. That lady also looked at the person who had arrived. When that person saw the lady's scarlet eyes and silver hair, his lips moved for a long time, but he did not say anything for a long time. After a short silence, he bowed deeply to the lady and said, "My apologies, my condolences." With that, he left in embarrassment. It wasn't that he was cowering after learning of the woman's identity. If she were an insignificant person, even if she were the Emperor of Heaven himself, he might have cursed at her a little. But she was Su Yan. It wasn't just the people of the Beast region who knew of Su Yan and Yi Zichen's relationship. The entire three realms knew that Su Yan was Yi Zichen's woman, and that she'd gone through 9 cycles of reincarnation in search of Emperor Ye's reincarnation. They couldn't tolerate anyone else slandering Yi Zichen, but Su Yan. They had no choice, nor did they have the right to interfere. Big sister Su Yan, my condolences. Little White pursed his lips and walked over to comfort her. He'd been with Yi Zichen since the modern realm, so he knew very well how close they were. My condolences? As she listened to everyone's comforting words, Su Yan looked at Yi Zichen with disappointment. You're all overthinking things. What do I have to condolences about? Someone as irresponsible as her is dead, so be it. What's there to feel sorry for? That's enough, little sister. It was as if Su Lu couldn't bear to listen any longer. She snapped at Su Yan, then frowned. The dead should be respected. No matter what, he died for the sake of all living beings. You still have us, so don't be too sad. I've already sealed Yi Zichen's body in ice. Let's take him back and bury him. No! Su Yan practically squeezed those words out through gritted teeth. Then, with a wave of her hand, she actually shattered the crystal coffin. This was utterly disrespectful. Everyone was shocked by Su Yan's actions, but at the same time, their hearts were filled with undisguisable rage. This was especially true for Zhuemo. When Su Yan slandered Yi Zichen, she'd already been furious. Now that she'd shattered the coffin, all her pent-up anger erupted. Su Yan, don't go too far. Zhuemo strode forward, her eyes blazing with fury as she rebuked Su Yan. In response, Su Yan merely glanced at her indifferently, then ignored her rebuke and laughed. Someone like him doesn't deserve to enter the 9-tailed fox clan's ancestral hall. Perfect, haven't you always admired him? Then take his corpse back. No matter what, he died for the greater good. We can't just leave him outside to be eaten by wild dogs. Su Yan. She suddenly took a step forward. From her posture, it was clear she was about to attack. The surrounding people hurriedly pulled her back, afraid they'd really start fighting. Let me go. I'm not that irrational. Zhuemo shook off their hands, pointed at Su Yan and shouted angrily, "I naturally have to take him away. But to tell the truth, I really feel sorry for Yi Zichen. To think he'd fall in love with a woman as heartless as you. I, Zuoremo, hereby swear on my status as the head of the Treasure Tower that from this moment on, the Treasure Tower will cease all cooperation with the Nine-Tailed Fox clan, including your subordinate clans. From now on, the Nine-Tailed Fox clan is the Treasure Tower's mortal enemy. Be careful. Don't let any of your clansmen appear within the Treasure Tower's sphere of influence." With that, Zuoremo walked up to Yi Zichen, put him on her back, and left Dragon City, one step at a time. The other humans glared viciously at Su Yan, then followed Zuoremo away. Although they didn't say anything, it was clear from their expressions that they truly hated Su Yan and the Nine-Tailed Fox clan. Only Su Lu'er sighed, her gaze filled with pity as she looked at Su Yan's silver hair. The others might think Su Yan had gone overboard and was heartless, but Su Lu'er, who'd experienced everything, couldn't possibly believe Su Yan was that sort of person. "Little sister, let's go home." Inexplicably, Su Yan, who'd put on a tough front in front of everyone, suddenly squatted on the ground and burst into tears. Su Lu'er and Su Zhu's hearts ached when they saw her trembling shoulders. Was she really fickle in love? If she was, she wouldn't have reincarnated for the Yellow Emperor. If she was really fickle in love, then her hair wouldn't have turned white overnight. If she was really heartless, then she wouldn't have said such harsh words at that time. At the end of the day, she loved him too much. She couldn't accept Yi Zichen's death. "Who does he think he is?" muttered Su Yan, still squatting on the ground between sobs. "Doesn't he know that my brother gave him his life? Doesn't he know that Kiki risked her life to save his? Everyone wants him alive, but what about him? Does he think his life is so cheap that he can just give it up on a whim?" "Little sister, don't cry." In truth, Yi Zichen had no choice. "No choice? That's just irresponsible," said Su Yan, her eyes bloodshot. Su Yan's eyes were red as she sobbed. "My brother died, Cuckoo also died. Now that he's dead as well, what should I do? He had no choice, haha." Su Yan laughed dejectedly as she rose to her feet. Her eyes flashed with cold light. Chapter 10:24. 100 years the invasion of the Devil race and the Blood race had left this continent in ruins. Unlike the previous invasion of the Devil race, the people here had lost too much in this war. There were too many things that needed to be sacrificed, to be remembered, and to be washed away by time to welcome a new life. 100 years. Even with the help of the 3 sacred lands and the support of the ley line, it took a full 100 years for the continent to recover its vitality. During that time, the half-beast region acknowledged the existence of the half-beastmen. They returned to the beast region, which had lost the heads of the 4 sacred beast clans, and gained new life. The immortal region, underworld, and heavenly court were no longer enemies. They formed an alliance. Even so, the survivors who'd survived were grateful for their future, but their hearts were still filled with indelible scars. After becoming the head of the Treasure Tower, Zuoremo didn't hesitate at all. She immediately announced that she'd cut all ties with the Nine-Tailed Fox clan. The elders objected, but Zuoremo used thunderous methods to intimidate them. As expected, Li Jiai became the sect master of the 100 Flowers Gate, and Lin Xie became the city lord of 100 Flowers City. Half a year after the war, Su Lu'er was no longer able to suppress her divine power and ascended. The position of clan head fell to Su Zhu. A few months after Su Lu'er ascended, Su Yan vanished from the Nine-Tailed Fox clan. This was a major event in the Beast region. The Nine-Tailed Fox clan mobilized all of its manpower to search for her, but to no avail. It was as if she'd vanished from the face of the earth. Su Yan wasn't the only one. Another shocking event occurred in the Outer Realms. Emperor Ye's son, Tiantian, also disappeared a few months after the war ended. Her disappearance shook the entire 3 realms. Only when the Buddha arrived did he say that everything had karma. He told them not to worry, and that the matter was over. However, the leisure house Yi Zichen had left behind never stopped searching for Tian. Zhuge Kongming and an elder of the Vermilion Bird clan inherited his mother Zhuge Hong's will and became the clan head. Little White returned to the Tiango clan and inherited the position of clan head. The White Emperor abdicated and ascended a few years later. Tu Biyu's son inherited the position of clan head of the Black Tortoise clan, while Xiaoyingda continued as clan head of the Dragon clan. As for the Flying Serpent clan that betrayed the Beast region, they were exterminated by the other peak clans of the Beast region. From then on, the Flying Serpent clan ceased to exist. Yi Zichen. In order to commemorate his sacrifice, the three realms, including the Beast region, erected a statue of him on the border between the Immortal region and the Beast region. However, due to the large number of worshippers, over time, this place became a flourishing ancestral hall. In short, a series of changes had taken place in the past 100 years. Due to the dragon vein, both the human and the demonic beast clans' cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. Countless new factions had sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain, causing the continent to gradually move towards a prosperous period. Sect leader, that was clearly the secret place that we discovered, but they said that they had discovered it long ago. In order not to destroy the medicinal valley, they did not pick the medicinal herbs inside. It was obvious that they wanted to seize it by force. The few envoys we sent didn't even get to enter their sect before they were chased out. Even if they are one of the top powers, our Hall of Slaughter isn't a pushover. The Hall of Slaughter was a well-known figure amongst the new factions of the past 100 years. Right now, they were discussing a secret place they discovered filled with large quantities of medicinal herbs, enough to further increase their overall strength. However, what they couldn't tolerate was that the moment they discovered it, the 100 Flowers Gate had ordered them to evacuate, telling them that the secret place belonged to them. Just as they were about to lose their prey, they couldn't bear it any longer. That's right, the 100 Flowers Gate doesn't take our Hall of Slaughter seriously at all. Calling them a peak faction is just flattering them. If we're talking about true peak factions, Brother Ting broke through to the Immortal King level not too long ago. We're the true peak faction. The way I see it, they're too full of themselves. We should show them what we're made of. That's not a good idea. No matter what, the 100 Flowers Gate's sect leader and Emperor Yi, give him face and call him Emperor Yi. If you don't give him face, isn't he just a dead man? Shut your mouth. At that moment, a black-robed man seated high in the hall shouted angrily. He was none other than the Hall of Slaughter's sect leader, Yun Ting. Yun Ting could be said to be the most dazzling figure to appear in the past 100 years. He was only 40 years old, but he was already an immortal king. Countless people trembled in fear at the mere mention of his battle arts. If it weren't for Emperor Yi, would you still be sitting here? No matter what, Emperor Yi created a future for us. If anyone dares to speak ill of him, don't blame me, Yun Ting, for disregarding our old friendship. The person who just slandered Yi Zichen nodded uneasily. The black-robed man's face was obscured, and he smiled sinisterly. But what you said earlier wasn't wrong. Although Emperor Ye's status is exalted, he can't influence the Hall of Slaughter's development. The 100 Flowers Gate has borrowed Emperor Ye's name to intimidate others for far too long. Our Hall of Slaughter has been a second-rate faction for far too long. Shouldn't we find an opportunity to send them a signal? Then what do you intend to do, sect leader? Tonight, we attack the 100 Flowers Gate. With that, the black-robed man flicked his sleeves and left. No one saw his sinister smile. Emperor Yi? Who the hell did he think he was? Night had fallen. It was clearly not a particularly peaceful night. News had already spread that the Hall of Slaughter intended to attack the 100 Flowers Gate. Countless factions of the Immortal region were paying close attention to what was happening. Among them, the Treasure Tower and Leisure House, two peak-level factions, were rushing to the 100 Flowers Gate's aid. It could be said that the Hall of Slaughter's signal was to contend with the three peak-level factions. On the ancient road, the Hall of Slaughter mobilized in full force. They knew that the Treasure Tower and Leisure House were rushing to the 100 Flowers Gate's aid, but that didn't affect Yun Ting at all. These three factions were peak-level factions, but not a single one of them had truly broken through to the Immortal King level. Everyone below the Immortal King level was an ant. Even if the three factions banded together, it wouldn't matter. Tonight, they had to flatten the 100 Flowers Gate. However, at that moment, an old beggar appeared in the middle of the road, a gourd of wine in hand. He sat on the ground. The old beggar acted as if he hadn't seen them at all. He sat in the middle of the road, gulping down his wine. Out of the way! The members of the Hall of Slaughter roared angrily, but the old beggar continued to sit on the ground, unmoving, as if he hadn't heard them. "You're looking to die." He'd been about to attack when Yun Ting stopped him before he'd even taken a few steps. "Let's go around." For some reason, when he saw the old beggar, Yun Ting felt his heart tremble with fear. Although the members of the Hall of Slaughter didn't understand, they didn't dare disobey Yun Ting, so they took a detour. But at that moment the old beggar, who had been sitting on the ground this entire time, suddenly raised his head. With a thud, he slammed his gourd of wine into the ground. "Where are you going?" "Hey, you old beggar, shut up!" Yun Ting snapped at the members of the Hall of Slaughter, then cupped his hands at the old beggar. "Senior, we're preparing to go to the 100 Flowers Gate. Go back. I'm protecting the 100 Flowers Gate." The old beggar's tone was very calm. After saying that, he picked up his gourd of wine and began to gulp down mouthful after mouthful. The members of the Hall of Slaughter frowned. The way they saw it, this old man was too good at acting. He was protecting them. What was he going to use to protect them? Their Hall of Slaughter wasn't one of the most powerful sects in the world, but their sect master was a supreme expert with the strength of an immortal king. This old beggar's sloppy appearance made him look nothing like an expert, yet he said he was protecting them. He'd probably drunk too much fake wine. Yun Ting couldn't help but frown. He couldn't quite figure out the old beggar's background, especially when he felt his heart tremble. He didn't dare act rashly. But there was no way he'd go back. He'd already announced that he was going to flatten the 100 Flowers Gate. If he turned back now, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? Senior. Chapter 10:25. The Old Beggar Senior. Yun Ting's tone darkened. Given his strength as an immortal king, it wasn't easy for him to respectfully address the old beggar as senior. But despite his kind words, the old beggar didn't appreciate it at all. Instead, he pushed his luck. "I hope you won't make a mistake." He really couldn't figure out the old beggar's limits. Suppressing his anger, Yun Ting tried his best to dissuade him. However, after crossing the line, the old beggar didn't even look at him. Instead, he continued to drink from his gourd. Creak. He clenched his fist. Yun Ting could no longer endure such disregard. Not to mention, the old beggar had so many subordinates behind him. If he continued to cower like this, he'd likely lose all his dignity in the sect. The old beggar truly did give him a frightening feeling, but he was an immortal king. Boom. Boundless spiritual pressure radiated from his body. Sensing the surging spiritual pressure, the old beggar arched an eyebrow and glanced at Yun Ting. However, he only glanced at him for a moment before looking back down and continuing to drink. This truly provoked Yun Ting. He didn't hold back any longer, gathering spiritual energy into his fist. Punch of destruction. This punch seemed capable of ripping apart the heavens. Wherever it passed, the air twisted and warped. The members of the Hall of Slaughter grew even more excited by the spiritual pressure. Quite a few of them could already imagine the old beggar's fate. In particular, the Hall of Slaughter who'd berated the old beggar at the start snorted. "Show off then. You won't even know how you died." But what they couldn't believe was that the old beggar had effortlessly caught the punch of destruction, which seemed capable of shattering heaven and earth. This was especially true for his carefree expression, which caused the members of the Hall of Slaughter to reveal expressions of astonishment. I said anyone who crossed the line would die. Why didn't you listen? Forget it, it seems you're still useful, so I won't kill you. The old beggar snorted coolly. With a wave of his hand, he tossed the immortal King Yun Ting to the ground and made him his cushion. Then he turned to the other members of the Hall of Slaughter and snorted. What are you waiting for? Even the immortal King Yun Ting had been easily subdued by this old beggar. How could they, mere sky immortals and human immortals, dare to provoke him? In the blink of an eye, the members of the Hall of Slaughter fled in panic, afraid that they would die at the old beggar's hands if they were too slow. He's a good seedling, but he doesn't learn well. Of all the sects you could have provoked, you had to provoke the 100 Flowers Gate. Who gave you the courage? With that, the old beggar turned his head and spoke into the sky. Come out. Before long, 2 middle-aged men descended from the sky. They'd personally witnessed the old beggar subdue immortal King Yun Ting with a wave of his hand. Subduing an early-stage immortal king with a wave of his hand. What kind of strength was that? Could it be that this old man was a consummate stage immortal king? When they thought of this, the pressure on the 2 middle-aged men multiplied. They respectfully walked over to the old beggar's side and bowed. Senior. Yes. The old beggar's reaction was very cold, which made the 2 middle-aged men complain incessantly. However, they didn't dare to be too obvious, and could only stand aside with their heads lowered. You are from the 100 Flowers Gate? Yes. That's perfect. This person seems to be the leader of the Hall of Slaughter. I've already sealed his spiritual sea. Take him back. As for how you deal with him, that's up to you. He kicked Yun Ting over to the 2 middle-aged men. By the time they came to their senses, the old beggar was nowhere to be seen. The 2 middle-aged men glanced at each other, seeing the shock in each other's eyes. Then, their gazes fell on Yun Ting. They reached out and picked him up, then disappeared from the ancient path. In the 100 Flowers Gate's front hall, Li Jia's mind was in turmoil when she heard that Yun Ting had broken through to Immortal King. She'd been at the peak of the sky immortal realm for more than 10 years, but even after all this time, she still hadn't managed to pry into the path of Immortal King. The Hall of Slaughter was preparing to attack the 100 Flowers Gate, and Yun Ting had broken through to Immortal King. The atmosphere was tense. But who would have guessed? You said a senior took action? With a wave of his hand, he captured Yun Ting? If it weren't for the fact that the head of the Hall of Slaughter had appeared in the main hall, Li Jia wouldn't have dared believe that the scout she'd sent out was telling the truth. Her gaze fell on Yun Ting. His hair was disheveled and his face filthy. He was tied up and kneeling on the ground. His expression was one of unwillingness. Just now, Li Jia had probed Yun Ting's spiritual sea. His spiritual sea was several times larger than a sky immortal's. From this, it was clear that he'd broken through to Immortal King. After all, Yun Ting was only 40 years old, yet he'd already begun prying into the path of Immortal Kings. Li Jia's heart ached, but at the same time, she was filled with suspicion. Even a peak Immortal King would find it difficult to suppress an Immortal King with a wave of his hand, not to mention Yun Ting's slaughter arts, a battle technique with incredible destructive power. There was no such expert in the entire Immortal region. Could it be that an expert from the 3 sacred lands or the Beast region had come to his aid? Did you get a good look at that senior's face? Li Jia frowned at the 2 middle-aged men. She wasn't an ungrateful person. If she knew who that senior was, she'd definitely pay him a visit and thank him. One of them revealed a troubled expression. In that kind of situation, he wouldn't dare look at that senior's face even if he was given 80 times the courage. The person with him, on the other hand, took out a jade slip from his pocket. We recorded this while we were hiding in the clouds. That senior should be inside. Li Jia took the jade slip and probed it with her spiritual awareness. When she saw the old beggar's face, she froze in place, shock written all over her face. Jia, we're here. At that moment, Zuemo of the Treasure Tower and Xueqi of the Leisure House arrived. When they saw Yun Ting tied up on the ground, they couldn't help but freeze. He's here? Didn't they say he was already an immortal king? Did you break through as well, Jai? Li Jie shook her head, then repeated what the two middle-aged men had said. Zuemo furrowed her brows. Senior, he tied Yun Ting up with a wave of his hand? Does someone like that exist in the immortal region? Or did the sacred lands intervene? I thought about it before, but they showed me this. Li Jie tossed the jade slip to Zuemo. Then she said, that senior is inside. Take a look. I think, never mind, take a look first. Zuemo was rather surprised by Li Jie's reaction. She didn't hesitate and probed the jade slip with her spiritual awareness. The jade slip flew out of her hand, then she saw Zuemo grab Li Jie's shoulder and ask nervously, that senior is inside. Zuemo immediately grabbed Li Jie's shoulder and asked nervously, where is he? Where is he? On the ancient path outside Hundred Flowers City. The ancient path outside Hundred Flowers City. I'll go find him. Zuemo turned around, but Li Jie stopped her. Don't go. He already left when I handed him over to my people. But are you sure it's him? Isn't he supposed to be in your clan's ancestral hall? Then do you think it's him? Zuemo asked. Li Jie hesitated, then bit her lip and said, I think it's him. Even though I didn't see his face clearly, I just think it's him. Li Jie's expression was filled with indescribable certainty. Zuemo's eyes actually reddened when she heard those words. However, a beautiful smile rippled on her face. Chapter 1026. Xia Kik's message. In a region of ancient trees on the outskirts of the immortal region, the old beggar, who'd tied up Yun Ting, staggered through the gaps between the ancient trees. After passing several hundred meters, a simple thatched hut appeared in the depths of the thicket. Burp! The old beggar's face was bright red, and his breath reeked of alcohol. His feet trembled as he walked to the stone table in front of the hut and sat down. He poured wine into his mouth, only to discover that it was empty at some point. Endless gourd of wine? That's all nonsense. He casually tossed the gourd to the ground. Relying on the alcohol, the old beggar lay down on the grass next to the stone table and stared at the dazzling river of stars overhead. 100 years. The old beggar muttered in a low voice. However, his voice wasn't as hoarse as before. Instead, it was ancient and filled with melancholy. 100 years. Your corpses have turned cold, but I'm still alive. What's laughable is, in 100 years, I haven't found a single trace of your soul or bones. In the darkness of the night, his bitter words were heart-wrenching. That's a divine artifact. How could you just throw it away like that? At that moment, a white-robed man suddenly appeared in front of the thatched hut. He reached out with his right hand and grabbed the gourd. He walked over to the old beggar and placed it back on the stone table. The old beggar completely ignored the man's appearance. It was as if he hadn't noticed him at all. He continued to lie on the ground and stare at the vast river of stars overhead. Hey, I say! I was the one who pulled out a strand of your soul from that soul lock and helped you reincarnate. I'm your benefactor, right? Can you stop ignoring me all the time? The white-robed man helplessly crouched down, but the old beggar snorted. Do I need you to meddle in other people's business? Hey you! The white-robed man furrowed his brows, speechless. However, he quickly relaxed and sighed. You're too disappointing. I've been at your beck and call for you for the past 100 years. I've been looking for Xia Kiki and Su Yun the entire time. I've only just found some clues when I came to find you, but you treat me like this. Forget it, I'll just pretend I'm meddling. I'm leaving. Wind seal. Just as the white-robed man was about to leave, a wall of wind surrounded him. The dispirited old beggar's spiritual energy trembled as he vaporized the wine. Then, he leapt in front of the white-robed man. The old beggar's voice trembled. Through his disheveled hair, One could see that his eyes shone with a light as bright as the stars of the 9 heavens. His hand, which was reaching for the white-robed man, trembled slightly, and his breathing quickened. "Guzichin, please don't joke with me. If you— What if it was me?" The white-robed man smiled calmly, then pursed his lips at the old beggar. "Why haven't you dispersed the wind seal yet?" The wind seal dispersed, and the white-robed man took the opportunity to sit down in front of the stone table. Tapping his fingers on the table, the old beggar nervously rushed over and sat across from the white-robed man. You said you have news about them? I never would have guessed that after a few years, you'd gain enlightenment in the 5 elements. 10 reincarnated saints truly do have a unique advantage when it comes to comprehending the laws of heaven and earth." The white-robed man didn't answer his question, but little did he know that he'd touched the old beggar's weakest nerve. "I'm asking you, do you have news about them?" Rumble. A sudden clap of thunder boomed through the sky. At the same time, the old beggar's body gradually emanated a frightening spiritual pressure. The laws around him were in chaos. The earth trembled, and the space around him distorted until it collapsed. The birds and beasts in the forest couldn't withstand the spiritual pressure. They cried out in pain and fled. The white-robed man sat calmly on the stone chair and arched his brows. When he saw the bloody aura surrounding the old beggar, he calmed himself and said seriously, "I can't say I have news about them. I can't say I have news about them. Tell me everything." The old beggar's tone was extremely oppressive. Although this sort of pressure didn't mean much to the white-robed man, he still shook his head. "I think I saw Xia Kiki in the Yao realm, but I'm not completely sure if it was her or not. However, based on her aura, I can't be wrong. Right, I think I saw Su Yen in Yao territory as well. She—" At the mention of Su Yen, the old beggar's expression trembled inexplicably. However, he didn't say anything. Instead, he let out a disappointed sigh, then frowned at the white-robed man. "So that means I have to ascend, right?" "You can interpret it that way." The white-robed man nodded noncommittally. "Besides, given your strength, you should have ascended long ago. It's just that you've been suppressing your spiritual energy all this time. From the fluctuations of your spiritual energy, it's already on the verge of overflowing. You can't suppress it for much longer, can you? You might as well take advantage of this opportunity to ascend." The old beggar's eyes suddenly flashed with a hint of vigilance. Sensing the old beggar's wariness, the white-robed man couldn't help but sigh. "Yizichin, do you think I'm lying to you?" When he heard that, the old beggar grabbed the man's hair. When he lifted the hair covering his face, the face revealed was none other than the immortal region's Emperor Yizichin. "Can I trust you?" Yizichin rubbed his forehead and pulled at his hair suspiciously. He stared intently at the white-robed man, as if trying to see right through him. "Are you sure this isn't part of your plan to help me ascend?" "Believe it or not, that's up to you." The white-robed man snorted angrily. "In any case, I've already said everything I needed to say. As for how you judge, that's your problem. That's all I have to say. Goodbye." With that, the white-robed man flicked his sleeves and left without so much as a backward glance. As Yizichin watched him leave, he sat in front of the stone table, unable to make up his mind. "Forget it." After a long silence, Yizichin stood up from his stone chair. He took a few steps forward and gazed at the vast Milky Way in the distance. "I'll have to go eventually, so I might as well go." As he considered this, Yizichin stopped suppressing his spiritual energy. The instant it spread out, the heavenly lightning descended one after another. Little did he know, in the sky not far from the thatched hut, the white-robed man had been watching them the entire time. When he saw Yizichin summon tribulation lightning, he smiled calmly. He understood Yizichin far too well. It was almost as if he understood himself. Rather than wasting his breath explaining things to Yizichin, he might as well just wave his sleeves and leave. It was more practical to goad Yizichin into action. Besides, he was very satisfied with the result. The only thing he worried about was that Yi Zichen's previous lightning tribulations had all ended in failure. Now that he'd reincarnated 10 times and forged a saint's soul, the heavenly lightning might be even fiercer than before. Chapter 10:27. I said. Rumble. Heavenly thunder rumbled, and a series of frighteningly deep rumbles reverberated through the sky. Birds shrieked and beasts scurried away. Yi Zichen stood beneath the thunderclouds, his hair disheveled and his face dirty. He sensed their pressure and smiled calmly. Then, to his surprise, he soared into the sky and stared directly at the inky clouds. "What's that kid doing?" The white-robed man couldn't help but frown. He was 1,000 miles away from the tribulation, but even so, he could feel its pressure despite his cultivation. Besides, in all his years of living, this was the first time he'd seen someone undergo tribulation like this. At that moment, Yi Zichen, who stood beneath the tribulation lightning, moved. Or rather, he spoke. I said, "Let there be wind." It was a simple sentence, but as soon as it left Yi Zichen's mouth, it transformed into the laws of heaven and earth. In an instant, countless gales whistled. Under these gales, the ancient trees that had grown for thousands of years were uprooted. Countless rocks were swept by the gales, forming a heart-palpitating sandstorm. The winds and clouds howled in reverse. The sandstorm contained such destructive power that even Gu Zichen couldn't help but be moved when he saw it. "That kid!" Just as Gu Zichen was sighing in amazement, Yi Zichen spoke again. I said, "Let there be rain." It was still the same simple sentence, but it contained the Tao of the heavens and earth that could not be defied. Countless dark clouds filled the sky. The density of the dark clouds seemed to have covered the lightning tribulation's thunderclouds. The torrential rain was like a hole in the firmament that had been torn open, pouring down from the sky. Yi Zichen stood in the middle of it, but when the rain reached him, it parted on its own. When it hit the ground, it transformed into a torrent of water that flowed away. However, this wasn't the end. Yi Zichen looked up at the tribulation and spoke again. I said, "Let there be lightning." In an instant, when his voice rang out, the entire sky distorted. Then, within the dark clouds that had formed the rain, an oppressive, sorrowful wail that surpassed even the heavenly thunder rang out. Rumble! Thunder rumbled, and it was as if all living beings were startled awake. Under this shocking thunder, everything knelt on the ground and bowed their heads. Even the muffled thunder of the lightning tribulation had disappeared at this moment. However, there was not the slightest bit of lightning amidst the countless thunderclaps. I said, "There must be electricity." Crackle! A purplish-red lightning bolt suddenly appeared in the sky. It was so bright that no one could look at it directly. In the blink of an eye, a second lightning bolt appeared, then a third. As a result, tens of thousands of lightning bolts flickered in the sky, and the lightning within the lightning tribulation dimmed after the lightning bolts appeared. The lightning energy within the thunderclouds was also devoured by the countless lightning bolts. He turned into nourishment, and as he distorted the sky, his radiance flickered. Wind, rain, thunder, lightning, 5 elemental laws. Is this the power of the 10 saints? The white-robed Gu Zichen was so shocked he was speechless. He stared in a daze at Yi Zichen, who stood in the sky, seemingly the embodiment of the laws of heaven and earth. He gulped repeatedly. Gu Zichen could naturally do this as well, but that depended entirely on his ruler-level strength. The only way to transform one's body into the laws of heaven and earth was to understand the laws of heaven and earth. Achieving this required tens of thousands of years of comprehension. Even Gu Zichen had only scratched the surface after breaking through to ruler and becoming one with heaven and earth. However, Yi Zichen was currently just an immortal king. Based on the fluctuations of his spiritual energy, he wasn't even a peak immortal king. He'd relied on his comprehension of heaven and earth to attract tribulation lightning, then used the laws of heaven and earth to resolve it. However, ascension lightning was the laws of the upper realms, while Yi Zichen comprehended the laws of the lower realms. The 5 elements Tao of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning looked cool, but to tribulation lightning that didn't belong to this realm, it didn't have much of an impact. Furthermore, he hadn't even used fire. Fire was the 3rd most intangible of the laws. It should have been before lightning. I said, let's have fire. Gu Zichen was still wondering why Yi Zichen hadn't used fire, but Yi Zichen had already spoken. Whoosh! A blazing fireball suddenly appeared in the sky. The fireball seemed to have fallen from the 9 heavens. It was like a burning sun that stood in the sky. In an instant, heaven and earth changed from day to night. As soon as the ball of fire descended, the pitch-black night turned into day. Countless major powers summoned this phenomenon. When they looked in Yi Zichen's direction, they sensed the pressure of tribulation lightning. Their hearts trembled, and at the same time they cried out inwardly. Someone's undergoing divine tribulation. Countless clans and clans started investigating who was undergoing tribulation. As the clans and clans scurried about, their hearts filled with envy, but at the same time they couldn't help but sigh. This tribulation was a little too grand. At the same time, the God Race's Shao family was in an uproar. Countless higher-ups were shaken by Yi Zichen's tribulation. They arrived at the lightning pool. Who is this person? I don't know. The person who'd caused Yi Zichen's tribulation to fall was visibly astonished. This person suppressed the lightning at the start of his tribulation, and now he's severed my connection with it. The Shao family elder knit his brows. He stared intently at the lightning pool, trying to see Yi Zichen's face clearly. However, it seemed as if the great Tao was shrouding his face. No matter what divine abilities they used, they couldn't penetrate the mist covering his face. Forget it. This kid is destined to become a god. With this kind of ability, he'll definitely shine in the god realm. Hurry to the Divine Mountain's Ascension Gate. As long as it's someone who ascended recently, recruit them to our Shao family. Yes, sir. The Shao family didn't dare tarry. They hurried to the Divine Mountain's Ascension Gate. Meanwhile, the Shao family elder stared intently at Yi Zichen, who was undergoing tribulation in the lightning pool. The blazing ball of fire radiated with unparalleled waves of heat, as if on the verge of melting the heavens. Yi Zichen stood still in the sky, then raised his hand high into the air. Summon the sword. At his command, the wind, rain, thunder, lightning, and fire fused into one. A holy sword over 100 feet long slowly descended from the heavens. The holy sword landed in Yi Zichen's hand, then he dragged it behind him and slashed at the tribulation lightning. Disperse. Every word was like a decree. The tribulation clouds formed in response to Yi Zichen's sword actually vanished into thin air. The holy sword in his hand transformed into a beam of multicolored light and merged with the heavens. In the blink of an eye, a rift appeared in the heavens. Pure, 7-colored light descended from above and enveloped Yi Zichen. The Tao of Divine Ascension. After undergoing tribulation, one would ascend to godhood. However, most ascenders had too many responsibilities, so they suppressed their divine power and delayed their ascension. Yi Zichen, however, had no worries. Chapter 10:28. Chapter 10:28. The God Realm. The God Realm was made up of an enormous continent with no end in sight. 9 divine mountains stood atop it. These mountains represented the 9 peak factions of the God Realm, occupying 9 cardinal directions in the north, south, east, and west. One shouldn't assume that the God Realm was created for gods. There were also spiritual bodies, human immortals, and sky immortals. However, due to the density of spiritual energy here, the people here generally grew stronger faster than those in the lower realms. Their foundations, however, weren't as solid as those in the lower realms. And after the gods' tribulation, when all the immortal spiritual energy was replaced with divine spiritual energy, the experts would head to the sacred mountain in search of a higher breakthrough. It's worth mentioning that the God Realm was generally for humans to live in. Humans who ascended from the lower realms would also stay there. Apart from that, there was also the Yao realm and the demon realm, which provided for Yao and demons respectively. The three realms of the god, Yao, and demon realms stood on equal footing, keeping each other in check and cooperating. It was common to see Yao and demons in the god realm. The northernmost region of the god realm was under the jurisdiction of the divine mountain of the north. Its territory was vast enough to accommodate trillions of people. For ease of management, the divine mountain divided the area into 72 districts. There were countless cities and towns in these 72 districts. Even the smallest town had at least 1 million humans living there. It could be said that the population was at its peak. However, due to the sheer number of people, the resources allocated to them were very limited. The divine mountains abided by the law of the jungle. They allowed humans who hadn't come to the divine mountains to kill and rob each other. As long as they didn't go too far, the divine mountains would turn a blind eye. The 13th district of the 72 districts, the outskirts of fallen God City. It was so desolate that not a single person could be seen within 1,000 kilometers. A blood-soaked youth gripped a sword that glinted with a cold light. The blade radiated an oppressive aura. It was obvious it was no ordinary weapon. Judging from the ripples of spiritual energy emanating from the youth, he was at least a peak spiritual body expert. An expert of this level couldn't be considered a peak expert in the far north, but he definitely wasn't one to be trampled upon. However, he looked rather dispirited. Wu Di glanced behind him and saw at least 10 pursuers, all of them brimming with killing intent. Wu Di, just give up and surrender. Hand over the Earth-grade artifact in your hand. For the sake of your family's face, I'll only cripple your cultivation, not take your life. Even if I have to self-destruct this prized artifact, I will not give it to you. The blood-soaked youth gritted his teeth and roared. His aptitude was mediocre, and he was almost 30 years old, but he was only at the perfected spiritual body stage. With his aptitude, the clan wouldn't waste any resources on him. Coupled with his special identity, his name was almost removed from the family. He was unwilling to give up. In order to have a chance to turn things around, he decided to team up with these people to search for treasures. Perhaps the heavens really did not disappoint him. He actually managed to find an Earth-rank treasure. In the God realm, magic treasures were divided into different grades, namely Spirit Artifact, Treasure Artifact, Immortal Artifact, and Divine Artifact. The grades were further divided into Mortal Grade, Profound Grade, Earth Grade, and Heaven Grade. Earth-rank treasures weren't peerless treasures, but in this God realm continent where resources were scarce, especially in a situation where there were very few artificers, they were extremely popular. When he'd obtained the treasure, he'd been excited for a long time. However, he didn't expect that the moment he obtained the artifact, his teammates would want to kill him and rob him of his treasures. By now, he'd been running for 3 days and 3 nights. His spiritual sea was completely exhausted, and he couldn't run anymore. Wu Di, why are you doing this? The scarred man couldn't help but sigh. Wu Di glared at him hatefully, wanting nothing more than to devour his flesh. Before we left, I already said that obtaining treasures depends on one's own ability. I obtained this treasure on my own, but you didn't keep your word. Obtaining treasures really does depend on one's own ability. If it were just ordinary spirit stones, then so be it. But this is an Earth-ranked treasure. If it were sold outside, it could sell for over 1 million spirit stones. How could I not be tempted? An ordinary man's wealth is his own ruin. You should know this. Be a good boy and give it to me. In your dreams. The blood-soaked youth gritted his teeth and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. He forcibly mobilized his withered spiritual sea and began to run. After him. When the scarred man saw this, he frowned and shouted, "TCH, TCH, TCH, this God realm isn't any good either. I feel like the spiritual energy here isn't even as dense as in the lower realms, where there's a ley line. In the novels I used to read, if you ascended, shouldn't you go to a transfer array and have someone guide you? What's going on with me? I've come to this barren wasteland, but I can't even find an NPC who can guide me. This was none other than Yi Zichen, who'd just ascended. As soon as he'd arrived, he found himself in this wasteland. He'd already been wandering around for over 2 hours, but to his astonishment, he hadn't seen a single person. Just as he was about to die of boredom, he saw a blood-soaked youth run toward him. I've finally run into a living person. When he saw the youth, Yi Zichen felt as if he'd just reunited with a long-lost relative. Little brother, wait a moment. The youth's vision blurred. When he came to his senses, he saw Yi Zichen standing by his side and resting his hand on his shoulder. An expert. He's at least an Earth immortal expert. As he sighed inwardly, the youth's expression grew serious, and he tightened his grip on his weapon. When Yi Zichen saw this, he couldn't help but freeze. It seemed this kid was afraid he'd steal his treasure? Yi Zichen could tell that the weapon was extraordinary, but he was used to playing with divine artifacts. A weapon of this level really didn't interest him. Little brother, don't be so nervous. Your weapon might be good, but it's not enough to catch my eye. I don't want to steal your treasure. I just want to ask you something. When he sensed that the youth didn't want his precious artifact, Wu Di relaxed. After thinking it over, he laughed self-deprecatingly. This senior was at least an Earth immortal expert. No matter how poor he was, there was no way he'd care about an Earth-grade precious artifact. Only someone like him would be so nervous about this sort of weapon. Senior, please ask away, but I'm currently being pursued, so I might not be able to answer too many of your questions. Wu Di replied respectfully and amicably. He'd only been explaining his situation honestly. He'd never expected this senior to lend him a helping hand. The way he saw it, this sort of powerful senior couldn't possibly care less about his life or death. All he wanted now was for this senior to hurry up and ask him how he was so he could hurry on his way. Someone's pursuing you? Yi Zichen arched his brows. He hadn't expected to run into something like this as soon as he'd arrived in the God realm. He glanced at Wu Di's bloodstains, which hadn't even dried yet. Also, he really did need to ask this kid a lot of questions. Chapter 10:29. You want to castrate me? In 3 short breaths of time, Scarface and his brothers had chased after Yi Zichen. When he saw their murderous expressions, it was as if they wanted to eat him alive. Yi Zichen was convinced that they were the ones Wu Di had said were after him. In Scarface's eyes, Wu Di was already a meal on his plate. That Earth-grade precious artifact, worth millions of yuan, was just a duck waiting to be devoured. When he thought about how once he sold the artifact, he and his brothers would be able to walk the path of glory, he chased after Wu Di with even greater fervor. Stop right there. At that moment, Scarface and the others heard a sudden clap of thunder. That angry shout struck them straight to the heart, leaving them dumbfounded for several seconds. Be good. The one who'd shouted was none other than Yi Zichen. When he saw that they'd obediently stopped, he smiled in satisfaction. Only then did Scarface and the others notice the disheveled Yi Zichen. He'd actually been rebuked by this old beggar. Scarface's heart burned with fury. However, before he could say anything, Yi Zichen walked up to them. Are you the only ones chasing after this little brother? Where'd this old beggar come from? Don't meddle in other people's business. Our axe gang isn't to be trifled with in the 13th district. I advise you not to invite disaster upon yourself. Scarface couldn't see through the old beggar's strength, so he could only bring up the faction behind him. The Axe Gang had a bit of a reputation in the 13th district. Their leader was a peak sky immortal, only a step away from becoming an immortal king. Within the 13th district, few were willing to offend a major faction like them. As a result, whenever the Axe Gang was mentioned in the past, they'd always been successful. However, his luck wasn't so good this time. He'd run into Yi Zichen, who'd just ascended. The Axe Gang? When he heard that, Yizichen's brows instantly shot up. When Scarface saw this, he couldn't help but snort inwardly. His expression was enough to convince Scarface that the old beggar was terrified. That's right. I'm a squad leader of the Axe Gang's 3rd Brigade. That brat beside you stole our Earth-grade precious artifact. You don't look like his accomplice. Hurry up and scram. If I'm in a good mood, I might let you go. Actually, if someone else were to join in, Scarface might even try to snatch something from that person. It was just that this old beggar didn't look like he had any sort of treasure from head to toe. Perhaps even if he were to be stripped clean, he would only be able to find a few low-grade spirit essence stones. If this wasn't enough for him to waste his time, he might as well get the hell out of here. Bullshit. Wu Di gnashed his teeth in fury. I was the one who discovered this treasure. You want to kill me and steal it for yourself? In truth, he'd said this intentionally for Yizichen's benefit. Scarface had already caught up to him, so it was practically impossible for him to escape. Right now, the only person who could save him was this senior. However, looking at this senior's expression, the chances were slim. Am I really going to die here? Wu Di felt like a wild beast was roaring in his heart, but he couldn't show it. He could only clench his fist. He had already thought it through. If Yizichen really did leave him, he wouldn't blame him. He understood the principle of the law of the jungle since he was a child. He couldn't blame anyone but himself for being too weak. As for the treasure, Scarface and the others couldn't even dream of obtaining it. At worst, he'd just detonate his treasure, then his spiritual sea. 18 years later, he'd still be a man. Senior, the Axe Gang is too powerful. How about you leave? When he saw that Yizichen hadn't done anything, Wu Di assumed he was troubled. He couldn't help but find a way out of this embarrassing situation. Ha ha ha. Yizichen's expression had been strange this entire time, but now he burst into laughter. He clutched his stomach and squatted on the ground, laughing so hard that tears welled up in his eyes. This sudden turn of events stunned Wu Di, Scarface, and the others. Scarface, in particular, stared at Yizichen in bewilderment. Had he gone mad from fear? This old beggar's mental fortitude was too weak. How could he stay in the 13th district like this? No one knew what was wrong with Yizichen. Only Yizichen clutched his stomach and pointed at Scarface and the others. The Axe Gang? Hey, you're the Axe Gang? My God, did I transmigrate to a Hong Kong or Taiwan movie? How come there's an Axe Gang here too? No, I'm dying of laughter. The Axe Gang. Ha ha. Yizichen really did seem like he was about to go mad. He couldn't stop laughing. When he saw Yizichen keep laughing, Scarface lost some of his patience. Shut up. What's so funny? Don't you understand what I'm saying? Hurry up and scram. Don't get in my way. Fine, I won't laugh. With that, Yizichen clutched his stomach and rose to his feet. However, his expression was still stiff, as if he wanted to laugh. I'm sorry, your Axe Gang sounds a bit familiar. Yizichen reached out and patted Scarface on the shoulder, then turned to Wu Di. Little brother, let's go. Since he's a member of the Axe Gang, I won't bully him. All right. Although Wu Di didn't know what this senior was up to, at least he hadn't abandoned him. Wu Di clutched the precious artifact in his hand, then eagerly followed after them. Stop right there. He wanted to run? How could Scarface allow that? Furthermore, he was blatantly trying to steal the juicy piece of meat right by his mouth. If he really let them get away, how was he supposed to show his face in the 13th district in the future? A stern roar rang out from his mouth. Soon after, he led a few of his brothers and surrounded them. Old beggar, it looks to me like you've lost your mind. I'm already giving you face by telling you to scram. Now you want to steal my juicy piece of meat and run? Yizichen didn't know why, but whenever he looked at Scarface, he couldn't help but think of how funny he'd been talking about the Axe Gang. He couldn't help but grin uncontrollably. Bro, what are you doing? I'm letting you off for the sake of your axe gang. Why don't you quit while you're ahead? Hurry up and run. Let us off? Scarface laughed as if he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. His expression instantly darkened, and he turned to his brothers. Go. Yizichin cocked his head helplessly. His lackeys surrounded him aggressively. Do you have to do this? Humph, old beggar, who asked you to meddle in other people's business? This time, I won't let you go. Hand over all your treasures. Otherwise, I won't kill you. I'll just castrate you. When he heard that, Yizichin shuddered. He felt a cold breeze blow past his crotch. He wanted to take his family jewels. This was intolerable. Even if he could endure it, he couldn't. The Yi family had only had one son for generations. Although he'd flirted with quite a few women, he hadn't left behind any descendants. There were 3 ways to be unfilial. Having no descendants was the worst. He absolutely couldn't bear the crime of being unfilial. Chapter 10:30. What are you looking at? Robbery. At ease. Attention. Line up to the right. Look forward. Loud, resonant slogans rose up from the desolate wastelands outside the 13th district. There really were a dozen or so badly battered men following suit, scowling miserably. This group was none other than Scarface and his lackeys. Yizichin clasped his hands behind his back and circled them. Look at yourselves. Don't look so miserable. Stick out your chests, raise your heads, suck in your stomachs, and lift your buttocks. Yizichin had somehow found a willow twig. If anyone's posture wasn't up to snuff, he'd whip them. Scarface and his lackeys had lost count of how many times they'd been whipped. In order to avoid a beating, they trembled and maintained a posture Yizichin was satisfied with, not daring to move. Naughty! 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 When he saw them stand firm, Yizichin smacked each of them on the back of the head. Scarface and the others all tightened their muscles, standing meticulously as if they were standing in a military formation. The blazing sun roasted them beyond recognition. Sweat dripped incessantly down their chins and onto the ground. Strangely, however, none of them circulated their spiritual energy to disperse the heat. Look at you guys. I didn't even want to talk to you, yet you're still trying to climb all over me? Now you've learned your lesson? Yizichin arched his brows and clasped his hands behind his back like a hoodlum. The soldiers didn't dare speak. They simply shut their mouths, puffed out their chests, and faced the blazing sun. Their hearts were filled with bitterness. And you guys. As he spoke, Yizichin looked to his right. You're Scarface's lackeys. You actually abandoned your boss and ran off? You're a team, don't you know? Don't you know the spirit of never giving up? Even if you know you can't beat me, as long as one of you doesn't run, you have to go up and fight. Only with courage can there be miracles, understand? This isn't a matter of courage. One of Scarface's lackeys muttered. He didn't think anyone could hear him, but then he saw Yizichin stick his ear to it. Naughty! Yizichin smacked him on the back of the head and roared, You talk too much? You talk too much. It seems like you're quite energetic. What's wrong? Are you well rested? Okay, Scarface, take your little brother and run laps. Plop. Scarface, who was on the left, knelt on the ground after hearing this. His face, which was bright red under the scorching sun, was filled with unconcealable bitterness. Lord, this lowly one had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. You are a great man who does not stoop to petty offenses. The Prime Minister has a big belly, so please don't play with us. We've already run dozens of kilometers under this sun, and you've even sealed our spirit seas. We haven't even had a sip of water. If this goes on, you won't even need to do anything. We'll die of dehydration. You talk too much. Yizichin slapped Scarface on the back of the head, then frowned at the kneeling Scarface. You can't even endure this little bit of suffering? If you were born during the anti-Japanese war, you would definitely be a deserter. However, when he saw their pitiful appearances, Yizichin couldn't help but sigh. Forget it, who asked me to be so soft-hearted? How about this, take out all the treasures you have on you. Scarface and the others were dumbfounded. They stared blankly at Yizichin without moving. What are you looking at? Don't you know this is a robbery? If you want to live, put down your treasures. You have to understand that where there's life, there's hope. It's better to live than die, understand? These treasures are just worldly possessions. So long as you're alive, you'll still have them. But you only have one life, don't you think? Even though he was unwilling to accept it, his reasoning was indeed reasonable. Scarface's subordinates, including Scarface himself, tossed their spatial pouches onto the ground. Once they'd taken out their treasures, Scarface respectfully placed the spatial pouches in front of Yizichin. Are you sure you've handed them all over? Don't try anything funny with me. My temper isn't particularly good, and I don't like it when people hide things behind my back. Before he finished speaking, Scarface took out another spatial ring from his pocket. Don't underestimate spatial rings. Although they weren't large, they were still worth a fortune. Everyone here had a spatial pouch, but only people with a bit of status could wear spatial rings. Regardless of how large the space inside was, just the fact that he'd taken out a spatial ring showed that Scarface was doing pretty well. When he took the ring out, his expression contorted. His heart ached from the bottom of his heart. Is that all? Yizichin didn't seem particularly satisfied. When he heard Scarface's skeptical tone, he immediately knelt to the ground. Sir, that's all. I've given you everything I've saved up over the past few hundred years. If you don't believe me, you can search me. Scarface's expression was as heroic as could be. If an ordinary person saw this, they might really have let them go. But this was Yizichin. Fine, then take off your pants. In the wastelands outside the 13th district, Yizichin weighed the spatial pouches and 2 spatial rings he'd stolen from Scarface's subordinates in his hands. His expression was one of delight. You're trying to hide them from me? When I hid them, you weren't even born yet. Yizichin snorted disdainfully. He'd just found the second spatial ring in Scarface's underwear. When he found it, Scarface looked like he'd lost all hope in life, but Yizichin didn't show any mercy. If he showed mercy to them, he'd be an idiot. When they'd robbed others by force, they'd never considered showing mercy to their victims. This time, he'd taught them a lesson. Wu Di. Yizichin called out to the youth behind him. Wu Di nodded, then saw a spatial ring and a few spatial pouches tossed towards him. He instinctively caught them, but when he saw what they were, he hurriedly shook his head and handed them back. Senior, I can't accept this. Here, you can have half. Yizichin frowned and pushed the pouches back. Senior, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have had much of a chance of surviving Scarface's pursuit, much less stealing their treasures. I'm already very grateful that I'm still alive. I haven't even repaid you for saving my life, and now you're giving me this? I'm ashamed to accept it. Wu Di bowed respectfully to a junior and retreated. Seeing his insistence, Yizichin didn't force him. He put the spatial pouches and rings into his pocket. Even now, he still hadn't seen what was inside. To him, these treasures really weren't worth his attention. He'd stolen Scarface's belongings precisely to give them to this kid, but the kid refused. Chapter 1031. Black Ox Town, Powerful. When Yizichin saw Wu Di's solemn expression, he took advantage of the situation to ask him about many things he didn't understand. How so? Senior, you might have come from another district, so you don't know how powerful the Axe Gang is. Earlier, when Yizichin mentioned the Axe Gang to Scarface, Wu Di had guessed that this senior wasn't a local of the 13th district. Actually, from Wu Di's explanation, Yizichin understood why the Axe Gang was so powerful, and he had a rough idea of how the factions were divided up. The extreme north was the Northern Divine Mountains territory, divided into 72 districts. These 72 districts were divided into 4 major districts: Mortal, Profound, Earth, and Heaven. Each major district occupied 18 districts. The mortal Great District had the worst concentration of spiritual energy, while the Heaven Great District had the best concentration. The levels here were also more detailed than in the lower realm. They were divided into false spiritual body, entering immortal, human immortal, earth immortal, sky immortal, immortal sovereign, and immortal king. In other words, compared to the lower realm, there was an additional level in between every two levels. In the mortal Great District, most people were below the human immortal level. After breaking through to the worldly immortal stage, they would pass through the forbidden zone and head to a higher level region to develop. The 13th Borough's Axe Gang was actually just a branch of the Axe Gang. Its leader was a human immortal, an existence that could intimidate the entire mortal Great District. Its headquarters was located in the profound Great District, and its leader was a sky immortal. More importantly, however, the Axe Gang was subordinate to the Sky Great District's Green Gang. The leader of the Green Gang was an immortal king realm expert, and it was said that the Green Gang even had a supreme expert who did not appear in this world. Senior, with your strength, you naturally wouldn't care about a small Axe Gang. But the Green Gang behind him isn't something we can afford to provoke. Moreover, think about it. Supremes have to ascend to the Divine Mountain, so why does the Green Gang have a supreme expert? That's obviously. Wu Di didn't finish his sentence, but Yi Zichen understood what he meant. There were people on the Divine Mountain. Yi Zichen really didn't care about any of this. Back in the lower realms, what hadn't he experienced? He'd even run into sage-level expert. He naturally didn't care about puny supremes. What made him even more speechless was that he hadn't ascended to the Divine Mountain and had actually ended up in this place. Moreover, it was a small mortal Great District. Wasn't this a tiger entering a flock of sheep? All of a sudden, Yi Zichen's expression turned rather strange. Senior, this junior advises you to leave District 13 as soon as possible. It's best if you don't use the transfer spirit array. Scarface will definitely report this to his superiors, and they will definitely send someone to find you. Maybe they will even wait for you at the transfer spirit array. With your strength, it shouldn't be a problem for you to walk through the forbidden area. Furthermore, you seem to have just passed through the forbidden area. As long as they don't catch you, you should be safe. They wouldn't be so determined to offend an expert like you just for Scarface and the others. Then what about you? When he saw Wu Di's expression, Yi Zichen knew that Wu Di hadn't thought about him at all. She patted him on the shoulder and chuckled. Don't worry about me, they can't do anything to me. How about this? Since I'm already involved, and I'm the one who offended this person, I'll be a good person to the end. I don't have a place to stay right now. Why don't you take me to your place to rest for a few days? If the people from the Axe Gang come, I will help you send them away. If they don't come, how about we make other plans? Why not? Of course I'm willing. Wu Di practically shouted. Having an expert like Yi Zichen stay with him was a huge boon to him, with absolutely no downside. Then why aren't you leading the way? Senior, this is Black Ox Town. 4 hours later, they finally left the wasteland and saw a city in front of them. Several squads of soldiers patrolled the perimeter. As Yi Zichen and Wu Di were about to enter, he saw Wu Di hand one of the patrolling soldiers a token. When he saw the soldiers stop Yi Zichen, Wu Di stepped forward and explained, Your Excellency, this senior is staying at my place. Without a temporary residence permit, you can't enter the city. Who knows if he made a deal with you on the outside? Once we enter the city, he'll find a random place to hide and mix with the spiritual energy of the town. Your Excellency, Black Ox Town is 1 spirit coin a day. If you don't have it, then scram. The soldier's tone was quite rude. Wu Di gnashed his teeth, took out 10 spirit coins, and handed them over. Give this senior a temporary residence permit for 10 days. Temporary residence permits were issued by the Divine Mountains, and there was a time limit. When the time was up, you'd be expelled from the city, regardless of your cultivation. Only by purchasing a house in the city could you live here permanently. To ordinary people, a single spirit coin was worth a fortune. Wu Di was only able to fork out 10 spirit coins because of the allowance his clan had given him last month. If he used up these 10 spirit coins, he'd have no money left to spend for the rest of the month. Here, the only way to earn money was by selling spirit herbs, spirit stones, or exploring secret lands. Of course, you could also earn money by selling pills, treasures, and talismans. However, only the peak powers of the Sky Great District would flock to such methods. They disdained coming to a place like the mortal Great District. The soldier weighed the spirit coins in his hand, then nodded in satisfaction. He took out a jade slip and placed it in Yi Zichen's hands. 10 days. If you don't pay up after 10 days, you'll have to leave Black Ox Town. The jade slip was cold to the touch. When Yi Zichen looked at it, he saw that time was still flowing. Interesting. There was even a time limit? Wasn't this the same as renting a house? The city walls were simple and crude. As soon as Yi Zichen set foot inside, he sensed that the spiritual energy here was far denser than in the wastelands. Is the density of spiritual energy inside and outside of the city different? Wu Di was stunned. He never would have guessed this senior would ask such an idiotic question, but he patiently explained. Every city has a great spirit gathering formation, so the spiritual energy inside is slightly denser than the outside world. In truth, we're only here for a short while. If we went to a city, the spiritual energy would be even denser. As for the higher level districts, I've never been, but I'm sure the spiritual energy there is much denser than in the mortal Great District. Yi Zichen nodded in understanding. Although he wasn't proficient in the art of divination or the transformations of spiritual formations, if he could set up a spirit-gathering formation big enough to house an entire town, he had to be extremely skilled. No wonder there was a fee to enter the city. So there was such a difference between the inside and outside of the city. Interesting. Yi Zichen couldn't help but shake his head. The more he understood about the God realm, the more he found it interesting. Chapter 1032. Junior Wu Di. As they ventured deeper into the city, Yi Zichen discovered that the closer they got to the center, the denser the population became. The few gardens near the center of the town were filled with people, and as the night went on, there were still people walking in. Wu Di noticed Yi Zichen's strange expression and took the initiative to explain. Temporary residence permits don't arrange accommodations in the city. If you want a place to rest, you have to go to the taverns and inns in town. However, it's already difficult enough for ordinary people to live in the city. Going to the taverns and inns for a second time is hard to bear. There's no helping it. Those who don't have much money have no choice but to do this. As they spoke, the two of them arrived before a small residence. It wasn't particularly large, but in Black Ox Town, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, it was extraordinary. Senior, this is my residence. Under countless envious gazes, Yi Zichen and Wu Di entered the courtyard. Although the residence wasn't in a particularly good location, having a place of your own was a dream of many homeless people. There were practically no decorations in the courtyard. The entire place was filled with spiritual herbs. Senior, please forgive me. The way Wu Di saw it, it was a humiliation for this great senior to live in his residence. His residence was filled with spiritual herbs, and there was practically no space for him to move around. Who knew? This senior might not like him at all. Isn't this good? At least there's a private residence to live in. Little brother, I didn't know you were doing so well in Black Ox Town. You even have a private residence. When I arrived just now, I saw quite a few peak spiritual body cultivators and human immortals without a permanent residence. Wu Di smiled sheepishly. I'm just borrowing the glory of my clan. The 13th district has 3 major clans: the Lu family, the Wang family, and the Wu family. I'm a member of the Wu family. I never would have guessed you were a descendant of a noble family. What do you mean, a descendant of a noble family? The Wu family has existed for countless generations, and they have more than 10,000 disciples. Most direct descendants live in the 13th district's Raging Flame City. I'm just a branch relative. Fortunately, I have the Wu family's blood flowing through my veins, which is why I'm able to live in Black Ox Town. Furthermore, Junior's situation is rather awkward. I'm not afraid of Senior laughing at me, but Junior is actually the son of the current patriarch, but I was born to a servant girl. As he spoke of his past, Wudi's expression became somewhat bitter. Because of his awkward status, he'd suffered the disdain of many of his clansmen since he was young. Fortunately, after his coming-of-age ceremony, he was sent to Black Ox Town and separated from his former direct bloodline clansmen. After arriving here, he lived in seclusion, all for the sake of avoiding the strange gazes of the other clansmen who were also sent to Black Ox Town. Actually, his past had always been a scar on him, and he had never mentioned it to anyone. But when it came to Yi Zichen, he always felt that this senior was different from the other experts he'd met before. He was willing to share his sorrows with this senior. If this junior was a proper branch family member, Scarface and the others wouldn't have dared to do anything to me. Although the Axe Gang was powerful, the Wu family had been in the 13th district for a long time. He knew that I was in an awkward situation and that my father was ignoring me. That's why he dared to snatch the treasure. When my mother passed away, she told me not to blame my father. But how can I not be resentful? If it weren't for his fickleness, Mother wouldn't have died. Wudi's eyes were bloodshot. He clenched his fists and trembled uncontrollably. He would never be able to forget the scene of his mother's passing. He would never be able to forget how he had knelt outside the Wu family's gates for more than 10 days just to send his mother back to the ancestral hall. But what did his father say? A maidservant was not worthy of entering the Wu family's ancestral hall. Who could have imagined that a skinny young man, his eyes filled with resentment, had arrived at the unmarked graveyard outside of Black Ox Town with his deceased mother in his arms? He had dug out a grave with his bare hands and buried her there. How could he not be resentful? Sensing the youth's emotions, Yi Zichen reached out and patted him on the shoulder. Wudi's fists were tightly clenched, but he grit his teeth and said, "I heard that there is a river Styx at the border between the demon realm and the god realm. Below the river Styx is the underworld. All the souls of the dead are recorded in the underworld." He'd always dreamed of one day becoming a peerless expert, then entering the river Styx to find his mother's soul and resurrect her. The funny thing is, I'm almost 30 years old, but I still haven't broken through to human immortal. Experts start weak, step by step. Don't be discouraged. So long as you have the conviction to become a peerless expert, you can definitely do it. Yi Zichen patted Wu Di on the shoulder to comfort him, then arched his brows. Earlier, you mentioned the underworld. What I want to ask is, do all souls fall into the underworld? This junior has only heard rumors. I don't dare say for certain whether the river Styx or the underworld really exists. However, when I was a waiter in a tavern, I heard 2 Earth Immortal seniors mention the river Styx. That's why I remember it. I see. Yi Zichen frowned and nodded, then looked at the youth. Then do you know how to go to the Yao realm? Senior, you're not really going to find the river Styx, are you? Wu Di stared blankly for a moment, but quickly realized he'd misspoken. Going to the Yao realm should be extremely difficult. We're in the extreme north, but the Yao realm is in the extreme south. If you want to go to the Yao realm, you have to go to the Divine Mountain in the extreme south. When the time comes, I'm not sure how to get there. Then do you know about the Sea of Innocence? Before coming here, Yi Zichen had never considered himself lucky enough to go directly to the Yao realm. Besides, even if he really did go there, given his meager strength, it would be difficult to track down Xia Kiki. In truth, going to the Yao realm wasn't particularly urgent. However, he did think of the Wish God. When he'd sent him back to the God realm, the the Wish God had mentioned the Sea of Innocence. If he could find him, perhaps little Keek's problems would be solved. The Sea of Innocence? Of course I know. The waters of the Sea of Innocence divide our 72 districts into 4 great districts. Really? That's right. Wu Di nodded confidently. I heard that the divine mountain above us is actually a sea. That sea is the Sea of Innocence. The seawater of the Sea of Innocence flows down from the divine mountain. This was all common sense. Wu Di didn't understand why this senior would ask such a question. When he heard about the divine mountains, Yi Zichen's excitement instantly extinguished. There was no need to think about it. The Sea of Innocence the Wish God mentioned was definitely above the divine mountains, but he was currently at the bottom. He'd noticed the divine mountains on his way here, and he'd tried flying up. However, he soon discovered that no matter how high he flew, the divine mountains seemed to rise as well. When he stopped, the divine mountains stopped as well. It always gave people a feeling that it was clearly within their reach, but it was also far beyond their reach. Haste makes waste. Yi Zichen was somewhat disappointed, but he quickly composed himself. He smiled calmly, took out a spatial pouch, and tossed it to Wu Di. Don't say you're ashamed to accept this. Besides, don't you want to get stronger? In that case, don't give up on any possibility of getting stronger. The essence spirit stones here are enough to help you break through your current shackles and become an immortal. Take it. Wu Di's eyes reddened. He gritted his teeth and grabbed the spatial pouch. Then, he knelt to the ground and kowtowed to Yi Zichen 3 times. Senior, this junior will never forget your great kindness. I still don't know your name. Chapter 1033. Li Kai and Jing Yunnan night in Black Ox Town was tranquil and pleasant. Yi Zichen sat cross-legged on his bed. He didn't absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Instead, he sat there in a daze. In truth, he wasn't as carefree as he'd seemed during the day. He just didn't want to think about it. However, when the entire world fell silent, his thoughts burst forth like a raging tide. River Styx. Yao Realm. Divine Mountains. He didn't know how long he had been muttering to himself. When day and night came to an end, and the people of Black Ox Town breathed in and out, accompanied by the rosy glow of dawn, he gathered his thoughts. A formless Taoist art appeared in his mind, and he began to comprehend the laws of heaven and earth. Yi Zichen had comprehended the Tao of the 5 elements during his 10 cycles of reincarnation. His method was to merge himself with the 5 elements and comprehend the laws of heaven and earth while controlling them for his own use. When Yi Zichen completely immersed himself in comprehending the Tao of the 5 elements, he became inanimate. 5 colored lights gradually appeared around his body. These lights represented the 5 elements of heaven and earth. Cultivation knew no time. When Yi Zichen opened his eyes once more, 5 days had passed. Hey, that kid isn't here. The first thing Yi Zichen did when he opened his eyes was spread out with his immortal awareness. He wanted to see how Wu Di was doing. He hadn't expected Wu Di to emerge from seclusion 1 step ahead of him. This was completely unexpected. It seems this kid has some talent. Based on the look in Wu Di's eyes, Yi Zichen was certain that he wouldn't leave seclusion until he broke through to entering immortality. Now that he'd disappeared from his room, that naturally meant he'd entered immortality. Yi Zichen admitted that he'd given Wu Di a lot of origin spirit stones, but the fact that he'd managed to enter the ranks of immortals so quickly proved that he was talented. However, he was afraid that it was just as he'd said. His identity was awkward, and he didn't have enough cultivation resources. That was why his cultivation was so low, but his foundation was decent. Yi Zichen's origin spirit stones, on the other hand, had given him the opportunity to break through his shackles. At that moment, Yi Zichen spread out his immortal awareness and found Wu Di's location. Just as he'd guessed, Wu Di had already entered immortality. Judging from the ripples of spiritual energy around him, he was on the verge of breaking through to the mid-stage. Yi Zichen was actually quite satisfied with their speed, but what made him frown was, this child's personality is a little too cowardly. Through his immortal awareness, Yi Zichen discovered that a few youths were currently bullying Wu Di. Given his experience, he could naturally tell that although these youths were also entering immortality, their foundations were unstable. Moreover, Wu Di had an earth-grade treasure. Those youths were no match for him. However, Wu Di was curled up on the ground. He allowed the youths to punch and kick him as they pleased. He didn't resist at all. This was a far cry from Wu Di's behavior from a few days ago. Looks like I'll have to take action. Yi Zichen sighed, then prepared to rush over. However, at that moment, he laughed. This kid is quite lucky. Forget it, let them play for a while. Since I've come to the God realm, I can't be as dispirited as before. I'm going to stink to death, so I should clean myself up. In an alleyway in Black-Yang Town, Wu Di was curled up on the ground, his body covered in footprint. His eyes flashed with cold light as he looked at the youths surrounding him. In truth, they were all members of the Wu family. Due to their limited talent, they'd been assigned to Black Ox Town. The youth in the lead was called Li Kai. His talent was average. However, his father was the Wu family's steward in Black Ox Town. He controlled all of the Wu family's resources there. With this protection, Li Kai could be considered one of Black Ox Town's tyrant. With the support of his father's vast resources, he was now entering immortal. Wu Di had lived in seclusion ever since entering Black Ox Town, mainly because of his relationship with Li Kai. His father was the clan head's wife's younger brother, and the clan head's wife had always found him, the son of a maidservant girl, an eyesore. Li Kai and his family didn't like him either, and they'd caused him no small amount of trouble. He'd come out mainly to thank Yi Zichen for helping him break through. He'd plucked the spirit herbs in the garden for quite a few spirit coins, hoping to buy Yi Zichen a pot of tea to express his gratitude. However, he never would have guessed he'd run into Li Kai and his gang. Have you guys had enough? Wu Di, who'd been enduring Li Kai's punches and kicks this entire time, gnashed his teeth. He'd curled up like this because he was afraid the pot of wine would shatter. He'd used up half the spirit herbs in his garden to buy this pot of wine. If he broke it, there was no way he'd be able to buy another. Ha, are you talking to me? Li Kai smiled playfully. He cocked his head to the side and sneered at Wu Di, who was curled up on the ground. I can see that you're also entering immortal. Why don't you dare fight back? Just look at how useless you look. As expected, you're the unfilial son of a maidservant girl. You'll never have any backbone in this lifetime. Say that again. He could hit him, he could curse him, but if he mentioned his mother... Wu Di's eyes instantly turned bloodshot. He glowered at Li Kai. You dare glare at me? Beat him up. With a wave of his hand, the Wu family youths at his side began to beat Wu Di up. All this time, Wu Di gritted his teeth and endured. He wanted to fight back, but a part of his rationality told him to endure. Li Kai's status was special. If he hit him, they might use this as an excuse to expel him from the clan. Endure. Wu Di repeatedly told himself to endure. As long as they were done beating him up, he'd be able to leave. Stop! At that moment, a feminine shout rang out from behind Li Kai. Everyone turned to see a young girl dressed in similarly embroidered clothes. Her almond-shaped eyes were wide open as she hurried over. When he saw her, Li Kai's gaze roamed over her body. More importantly, his gaze was filled with greed. Why are you here? Get out of my way. The girl pushed Li Kai aside and ran nervously to Wu Di's side. Wu Di, are you alright? She asked worriedly. Jing Yunan? What are you doing here? Wu Di was shocked. This girl was the granddaughter of the Wu family's first retainer, Jing Qinggong. She ranked in the top 10 of the Wu family's genius rankings. She was only 24 years old, but she was already at the peak of entering immortality. She was only a single step away from becoming an immortal. In the Wu family, Only Jing Qinggong and this girl had treated him slightly better. When the Wu family had wanted to expel him from the clan, Jing Qinggong had been the one to dissuade them. Don't ask so many questions. How are you? Do you feel unwell? Jing Yunan asked in concern. Then she glared at Li Kai and roared angrily. Chapter 1034. I'm his master. As soon as she finished speaking, heavy spiritual pressure enveloped Jing Yunan. The heavy spiritual pressure made Li Kai and the others feel their chests clench. Wu Di grabbed Jing Yunan's arm and shook his head at her. Forget it. He dusted himself off, then rose to his feet. When he saw that the jug of wine in his lap hadn't broken, he smiled in relief. Jing Yunan's nose twitched, and she immediately noticed the jug of wine. Wu Di, even if the clan sends you to Black Ox Town, you shouldn't be so disheartened. The immortal brew is good, but you should focus on your cultivation. When the time comes, you'll amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. If my grandfather puts in a few good words for you, you'll definitely be able to return to the clan. Clearly, Jing Yunan had misunderstood. When she saw how worried Wu Di was about the jug of wine, she thought he'd become disheartened and started living a befuddled life. Wu Di didn't explain. He simply smiled and nodded at her. Got it. Can you stop being so perfunctory? Let me tell you, I came here to inform the clansmen of Black Ox Town that the clan's grand competition will be held in a month. If you act like this, do you really think you can make it into the top 100? The clan's grand competition. When the youths by Li Kai's side heard about the competition, they all grew excited. The Wu clan had far too many clansmen. If they wanted to distinguish themselves from the rest, they had to first possess dazzling, undeniable talent and second, win the clan's grand competition. As long as they made it into the top 100, they'd become the clan's elite. Their status would rise with the tide, and they wouldn't need to worry about cultivation resources. The youths by Li Kai's side were already rubbing their palms in glee. Once they returned, they'd definitely enter secluded cultivation for a month so that they could shine in the clan's grand competition. Him? Lil Nan, you're overestimating him. He's just the bastard of that filthy maidservant girl, and he wants to make it into the top 100? With his status, he might not even be able to enter the clan's great gates. It's best if you don't get too close to him. Don't get infected by his bad luck. Li Kai snorted disdainfully. He'd heard about the clan's grand competition from his father half a month ago, so he wasn't surprised to hear it. Li Kai, you better take back what you said before. Wu Di glared icily at Li Kai, his knuckles cracking as he clenched his fists. Apologize? Do you want me to apologize to you, a beast, or to your unruly mother? Don't talk about my mother like that. Why can't I say it? I can't even enter the clan's ancestral hall. In the end, I can only be buried in an unmarked grave. If she's really a virtuous woman, why can't she enter the ancestral hall? Shut up. Boom. The spiritual pressure of the entering immortality level was suddenly released. Feeling this spiritual pressure, Jing Yunan's beautiful eyes sparkled as she looked at him. Li Kai stood in front of Wu Di. He no longer felt like the little bastard who wouldn't retaliate when hit or scolded. Instead, he felt like a primordial beast. Bang. Li Kai's legs gave way and he fell to the ground. Humph, trash. With a cold shout, Wu Di turned around and left. Kill him for me. Li Kai's eyes were bloodshot as he sat on the ground. His clansmen and the guards his father had arranged for him instantly blocked Wu Di's path. Li Kai, what do you think you're doing? You can fight amongst clansmen, but you can't take their lives. Don't you know that? Jing Yunan roared. When Li Kai heard that, he smiled playfully. Let me tell you, in Black Ox Town, I'm the heavens. Jing Yunan, although you're the Grand Honorary Delegate's granddaughter, don't forget that you're still an outsider. You don't have the Wu family's blood running through your veins. I advise you to mind your own business. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Kai turned to the people surrounding Wu Di and berated him. What are you waiting for? Scram! At that moment, A thunderous roar reverberated through the sky. In the blink of an eye, the people surrounding Wu Di were sent flying. They crashed to the ground and coughed up mouthfuls of blood. This sudden turn of events stunned everyone. Then they saw a black-robed man standing by Wu Di's side. He stared coldly at Li Kai and the others. Even the human immortal-level experts watching from the sidelines hadn't noticed how Yi Zichen had appeared. It was obvious that this expert who'd appeared out of nowhere was stronger than a human immortal. Son. For a moment Wu Di couldn't be sure. His impression of a senior was that of a disheveled old beggar, but the man standing next to him. His eyes were bright, his posture ramrod straight, and he radiated authority without being angry. His entire body radiated the aura of a superior. His eyebrows, in particular, were as straight as swords. Just looking at them made one's heart tremble. What, you don't recognize me? When he saw Wu Di's astonished expression, Yi Zichen pursed his lips and smiled. He reached out and rubbed Wu Di's head, then took the gourd of wine from him. For me? Wu Di hadn't expected this person to really be that senior. He was stunned for a moment, but when he heard Yi Zichen's question, he hurriedly nodded. It's for you, senior. Yi Zichen didn't hesitate. He poured the wine into his mouth, allowing it to flow down his chest. Then he smashed the gourd against the ground. Good wine. When he saw Yi Zichen drink to his heart's content, Wu Di smiled from the bottom of his heart. He'd been a bit worried that this immortal brew wouldn't make it to Yi Zichen's mouth. The situation suddenly changed. Li Kai's guards and youths retreated to his side. Jing Yunan stared blankly at Yi Zichen. When she realized that his relationship with Wu Di wasn't shallow, she giggled and ran over to him. Junior Jing Yunan greets you, senior. Yi Zichen nodded at Jing Yunan, then his expression darkened. He slowly walked up to Li Kai. Li Kai never would have guessed that Wu Di was acquainted with such an important figure. Under this senior's gaze, he felt the threat of death loom over him. Dad, save me. As soon as he said that, he heard the sound of something tearing through the air. Who dares? The man in the sky felt as if someone had grabbed him by the throat. He forcefully swallowed the second half of his sentence, then plastered a warm, friendly smile on his face. He was a middle-aged man. Dad. When Li Kai saw him, he hurriedly ran over. The man glared at him, then cupped his hands at Yi Zichen. I am Li Wanlong, the Wu family's representative of Black Ox Town. Greetings, fellow Taoist. What has my son done to offend you? Please tell me, and I'll be sure to punish him. Li Wanlong's expression was respectful and friendly. He couldn't see through Yi Zichen. He was already a mid-stage human immortal expert. Although he couldn't see through Yi Zichen's strength, there was no way he was an Earth immortal expert. An expert like that would have long since gone to the profound Great District. Why would he linger in the mortal Great District? Your son didn't offend me, but he offended my disciple. Yi Zichen's expression was indifferent. When Li Wanlong heard that, his heart thumped wildly. He glared at Li Kai. Fellow Taoist, may I ask if your disciple? Before he could finish speaking, Li Wanlong saw Yi Zichen drag Wu Di over. Chapter 1035. Compensation. In truth, Yi Zichen had his own reasons for saying this. He'd only just entered the God realm. If he just focused on figuring out how to get to the Yao realm, the divine mountains, and the river Styx, that sort of life would be far too boring. Although Wu Di's family wasn't particularly powerful, they still had some status in the 72 districts. If he borrowed Wu Di's power, he could gain control of the Wu family's resources, gain their trust, or do something else. Perhaps that would be far more effective than doing things on his own. Besides, he really did want to pretend to be this youth with a story in his heart. This was the first step in his preparations. Master. When he heard this news, Li Wanlong's eyelids twitched. In truth, his older sister, Li Ku, had played a part in sending the clan to Black Ox Town. His primary mission was to help the Li family accumulate wealth and expand their influence. His second mission was to eradicate that bastard, Wu Di, the maidservant's son. Although Wu Di wasn't that much of a threat to his sister's status as her son, he was still a hidden danger. There was no way the Li family would dare attack Wu Di from the shadows. No matter what, Wu Di was the current family head's son. If the Wu family was determined to investigate, they'd definitely find out that they'd done something. If that happened, the Li family might have to bear the Wu family's wrath. As a result, to be on the safe side, they'd constantly squeezed Wu Di's cultivation resources and suppressed his strength. Li Kai's mockery was also to Li Wanlong's benefit. He wanted to make a mistake. So long as Wu Di dared attack Li Kai, the Li family would naturally have a reason to erase his name from the Wu family's records. But they never would have guessed that Wu Di would be so patient. More importantly, he now had a master who was at least a peak human immortal. Li Wanlong's thoughts raced, but he plastered a friendly smile on his face. I never would have guessed you were my dear nephew Wu Di's master. My dear nephew has never performed particularly well in the family, yet you've taken a liking to him. Perhaps he really does have some sort of talent that our Wu family hasn't discovered yet. My dear nephew is truly fortunate to have an expert like you by his side. His words were full of schemes. Not only did he emphasize Yi Zichen's profound cultivation and discerning eyes, he also subtly mentioned the Wu family's tiger banner. How could Yi Zichen not understand the meaning behind this? However, he snorted ungratefully, "Don't worry. You don't have to say anything nice. I've heard too much of it, and I don't feel anything anymore. Since I have appeared here, it is for the matter of my disciple being bullied and humiliated. Wu Di is my precious disciple. I originally planned on taking him to a high-class district, but he didn't want to leave because of old friendships, so I could only stay here with him for a few days. Who would have thought that I would see such a scene? Brother Myriad Dragon, how do you think we should resolve this?" Li Wanlong couldn't help but frown at Wu Di's domineering attitude. Even after hearing him mention the Wu family, Li Wanlong didn't give him any face. He inwardly cursed Wu Di for being a fool, but his expression remained as friendly as ever. However, this smile was directed at Wu Di. "Lil Di, I'm here to apologize on your cousin's behalf. Ever since I was sent to Black Ox Town, I've been busy with the family's development. I haven't paid much attention to the relationship between you and your brother. This is an oversight on my part. How about this? When I get back, I'll definitely discipline that brat Li Kai even more strictly. The clan's grand competition is just around the corner, so I'll give you some cultivation resources. It'll help your cultivation take another step forward. That way, you'll be able to perform well. What do you think?" In truth, Wu Di hadn't expected Yi Zichen to accept him as his disciple. If he could really become this senior's disciple, he would naturally be more than willing. However, he felt that his talent was mediocre, and he was afraid that if he rashly accepted Yi Zichen as his master, he'd offend this senior. Now, however, Yi Zichen was calling him his disciple. He was obviously backing him up. As for Li Wanlong's sugar-coated bullets, Wu Di was completely immune to them. Although he didn't know too much inside information, he was well aware that the Li family had always wanted to remove him from the Wu family. Now Li Wanlong was calling himself his uncle and offering him cultivation resources. All of this was built on Yi Zichen's foundation. Wu Di sneered. In his heart, he was utterly unwilling to forgive the Li family, but he didn't want Yi Zichen to get dragged into this mess because of him. All he could do was suppress his disgust and bow to Li Wanlong. "Then we'll do as you say, uncle. That's more like it." Li Wanlong smiled in satisfaction. This was exactly what he'd expected. The way he saw it, given Wu Di's situation, so long as he showed even the slightest bit of kindness, Wu Di would be overwhelmed by his favor. It was just a loss of some resources. Besides, Li Wanlong hadn't mentioned how much he'd give Wu Di. When the time came, He'd have the final say on how much he'd give. Wait a moment. Yi Zichen suddenly spoke up. What is it? In truth, Li Wanlong disliked interacting with people like Yi Zichen, but given the current situation, he had no choice but to treat him with courtesy. How many resources are you willing to give me? Yi Zichen was a master of word games. Li Wanlong was still too inexperienced to compete with him. Li Wanlong's smug expression darkened. It seemed it was easy to trick Wu Di, but his master was a bit harder to deal with. Then, Your Excellency, you're the one giving resources to your nephew. I'm not the one taking them by force. Why are you asking me for my opinion? Wily old fox. Li Wanlong inwardly cursed Yi Zichen, then said, 300 low-grade spirit stones and a bottle of third-grade immortal pills. As he spoke, Li Wanlong studied Yi Zichen's expression. When he saw that it didn't change in the slightest, he continued. And 100 stalks of 100-year-old spiritual herbs. And 20 third-grade immortal talismans. And an earth-grade precious sword. Your Excellency, please don't go too far. Li Wanlong gnashed his teeth as he spoke. Even he felt the pinch of handing over so many resources, but Yi Zichen's expression didn't seem particularly satisfied. In truth, it wasn't that Yi Zichen wasn't satisfied. Rather, he had no idea what these resources were worth. Zheng Yunan, on the other hand, snuck up to Yi Zichen and whispered, Senior, that's enough. These treasures are worth at least 1,000,000 spirit coins. 1,000,000? Is that a lot? Yi Zichen arched his brows. He didn't try to hide his words. When Li Wanlong heard this, he almost cursed. 1,000,000 spirit coins wasn't a lot? Given his current status, 1,000,000 spirit coins was equivalent to a year's worth of savings. Chapter 1036. Let me teach you a lesson, Master, this really is quite a bit. Although he resented Li Wanlong, when he heard that he was willing to part with so many resources to settle the matter, Wu Di couldn't help but feel his heart race. A full 1,000,000 spirit coins. If he had to save up this much, it'd take him hundreds or even thousands of years. Is that so? All right, since my precious disciple is satisfied, then let's settle for this. You're really stingy as an uncle. Fortunately, my disciple is sensible. Yi Zichen pursed his lips in apparent reluctance. Li Wanlong gnashed his teeth in anger. Stingy? If it weren't for the fact that he controlled the Wu family's resources in Black Ox Town, forget about 1,000,000 spirit coins in a year. He'd struggle to save up even 10 years. Most ordinary Earth immortals only had a few million spirit coins in total. Even 1,000,000 was stingy. Who did he think he was? A sky immortal? An immortal king? If he really was that kind of lofty existence, why would he run all the way to the mortal district? Since you're satisfied, and my dear nephew Wu Di is satisfied, how about we just let this go? Yi Zichen suppressed his fury and nodded. Then he raised his hand and said, Don't worry. Wait a moment. Your Excellency, what are your orders? My disciple already has an Earth-grade precious artifact. Could you exchange it for battle armor or a supplementary spiritual treasure? Do you think battle armor and weapons are the same price? Li Wanlong really wanted to shout. Battle armor was far more expensive than weapons of the same grade. Although he cursed inwardly, he still nodded amiably. No problem. With that, Li Wanlong grabbed Li Kai's hand and prepared to leave, but at that moment. Wait a moment. Li Wanlong had his back to Yi Zichen. He gnashed his teeth, but when he turned around, his expression was as friendly as ever. Do you have any other orders, Your Excellency? Since this is an uncle's way of showing concern for his nephew, you have to pay for it out of your own pocket. No matter what, don't take up the family's resources, lest others gossip. If Yi Zichen hadn't said that, Li Wanlong really would have given Wu Di the family's resources. Even if the clan investigated, he could accuse Wu Di of abusing his power to bully and steal from him. But now that the other party had pointed it out, and the granddaughter of the first foreign chamberlain, Zheng Yunan, was also here, It was really not good for him to use the family's resources. Li Wanlong's face was ashen as he thought about how he would have to fork out his own money. No problem. Uncle cares about his nephew, so how could he touch the family's resources? As a deacon sent by the family, I can't test the law. That would be best. Only then did Yi Zichen reveal a satisfied expression. He watched as Li Wanlong cupped his hands and left. Wait, to tell the truth, Li Wanlong was on the verge of collapsing upon hearing this. So long as Yi Zichen said those two words, there was absolutely nothing good waiting for him. However, he wasn't confident in Yi Zichen's strength, so he had no choice but to patiently turn around. Do you have any other orders? At this time, Li Wanlong was no longer as friendly as before. There was a ball of fire burning in his heart, and it was hard to suppress it. However, Yi Zichen completely ignored him. Instead, he turned to Wu Di and said, "Don't worry. Disciple, let me take this opportunity to teach you a lesson. Sometimes, forbearance isn't the best way to handle things. Sometimes, it's more direct to take action. For example, just now, when these people bullied you, you should have acted like this." Bang! Bang! Several afterimages flashed by. Not even Li Wanlong saw what Yi Zichen had done. By the time he turned around, he saw that all of Li Kai's bodyguards, including Li Kai, were lying on the ground, blood pouring out of their mouths. "Hit me back." Yi Zichen gently patted Wu Di's head, his expression calm and relaxed. He didn't care about the others, but when he saw how badly his son was injured, and how badly he'd need at least a month to recover, he couldn't even participate in the clan's grand competition. "What is the meaning of this, Your Excellency?" All of a sudden, the spiritual pressure within Li Wanlong's body was completely released. His entire aura flourished, and the boundless spiritual pressure caused the surrounding spectators to feel an endless pressure. "What do you want?" Yi Zichen didn't even activate his spiritual energy in the face of this spiritual pressure. He merely glanced at him. In an instant, Li Wanlong felt as if he had fallen into a bottomless pit of ice. A chill ran from the soles of his feet all the way to the top of his head. Those indifferent eyes instantly sobered him up, and the majestic aura also made him withdraw. "Senior, please don't blame me. I didn't mean to offend you." Jing Yunan couldn't help but raise her eyebrows when Li Wanlong referred to himself as a junior. This sort of junior's greeting was only used when the other party was an entire stage above them. Li Wanlong was already a human immortal. Could it be that Wu Di's master was an earth immortal? When she thought of this, Jing Yunan's eyes lit up with delight. She was genuinely happy for Wu Di. "Is my disciple someone you can bully?" Yi Zichen said coolly, then put his hand on Wu Di's shoulder. "Wu Di, from now on you'd better stand up straight. Don't be afraid, you still have master behind you." Wu Di's heart ached inexplicably. Ever since his mother passed away, no one had ever treated him like this. He resisted the urge to cry, straightened his back, and nodded solemnly. Yi Zichen's name, as well as his words, were forever etched into his heart. He'd never forget them. As for you, Yi Zichen's gaze fell on Li Wanlong. By now, Li Wanlong was already certain that this expert was at least an earth immortal. He might even be a sky immortal. He didn't dare meet Yi Zichen's gaze. All he could do was lower his head. "Senior, please speak. I'll give you 3 days to deliver the resources you promised my disciple to his residence. If even a single spirit stone is missing, this matter won't be over. Do you understand?" I understand. There's no need for 3 days. I'll deliver them to my dear nephew first thing in the morning." What pain! What reluctance! Right now, Li Wanlong's survival was the most important thing. If this kind of expert wanted to squash him to death, it would be as easy as snapping a finger. Even if he was killed here, with his sister's relationship, the Wu family would definitely not provoke this kind of expert. Money was a worldly possession. So long as he was still alive and working in Black Ox Town, he could get it back. I said 3 days, so it's 3 days. You're delivering it tomorrow? Are you trying to make trouble for me? Yi Zichen frowned. Li Wanlong was on the verge of tears. He nodded repeatedly. 3 days. Senior, if you say 3 days, then 3 days. That's more like it. Yi Zichen snorted coldly at Li Wanlong. This snort almost scared Li Wanlong's heart out of his chest. Then I'll take my leave. Wait a moment. Jing Yunan couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. Li Wanlong's face was filled with sorrow, but when he looked at Yi Zichen, he was all smiles. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Senior, do you have any other orders? I'm actually quite embarrassed to make you bleed like this. How could that be? As his uncle, it's only natural for me to give my nephew some cultivation resources. Are you sure you're telling the truth? Absolutely. Li Wanlong nodded vigorously. Yi Zichen pursed his lips and shook his head. In truth, I can't bear to make you bleed like this either. It's nothing. It's just my duty as your uncle. Li Wanlong smiled apologetically. Right now, his only goal was to get the hell out of here. If he stayed here any longer, he was afraid his heart would stop beating. The more you say that, the more embarrassed I feel. Yi Zichen's eyes brimmed with conflict. 1,000,000 spirit coins is a fortune to anyone, but it's also a token of your kindness. If I don't accept, it'll seem like I'm not giving you face. How about this? Wu Di, come over here. Yi Zichen reached out and called Wu Di over, a warm smile in his eyes. Then, he heard Yi Zichen speak.